No matter how good you are at the wrestling, you are at the mercy of those in charge. I mean, even if you are Stone Cold Steve Austin, if you get told your gimmick is a fish who has transformed into a human and is now searching for their salmon family, well, it ain't gonna go well. Some individuals can recover from this, but the majority get totally murked. So prepare yourself, my friends. This is 10 moments wrestlers never recovered from. Number 10, Lance Storm is boring. Now this one annoys me because it's not true at all. If you do listen to Lance Storm these days, that guy is so smart, holding wrestling accountable in a way few others do. You don't have to agree with his take, but it's always a fascinating insight and will give you an interesting angle on many current stories. Maybe this is why in 2003, Vince McMahon thought it would be a great idea to sort of bury this dude. It's total speculation on my end, but I guess Storm may have come up with some logical plot holes, and management didn't like it. So halfway through his match with Garrison Cade, the general manager Steve Austin walked out with a pillow and pretended to fall asleep. Yep, this was boring, apparently. I can only assume the plan was for fans to think the same, but this wasn't accurate. Storm was excellent bell to bell and somebody we can all learn from. You don't start a successful wrestling school because you suck. It also felt like WWE wanted you to change the channel when he was on TV, which is not the idea. And surprise, surprise, this didn't help him at all. Lance retired in 2004, so never really got a chance to put this right. He deserved that opportunity. Guy is really underrated. Number 9, Rick Bogner is Razor Ramon. I mean, nobody could have survived this. You turn up to work and get told you have to pretend to be somebody else. You're done for. This was Vince McMahon's attempt to flip off Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, who had gone to WCW because he did indeed own the copyright on their characters. So screw those guys. He was sure that anybody could do it. We also had a heel Jim Ross introduce them, which is even more confusing, and at the same time, we trolled the audience. He actually pretended that the original Razor and Diesel were coming back. My word. This was such a disaster, even Vince realized he made an error and cut it short, with Bogner's last WW appearance coming at the 1997 Royal Rumble. He wasn't in it for very long and was out the company overall soon after. Never really got a chance on a major stage to show what he could actually do as himself. Ridiculous. Number 8, Anthony Ogogo's weigh-in. Now, I don't think this one was as bad as we made out. It didn't go to plan, and in hindsight could have been done better, but it was mostly ill-advised as opposed to terrible. Felt like some people went way over the top. To be fair, however, Ogogo himself in an interview did call it flubbing dog shib, so maybe I'm being too nice, and he was right in the sense the 2021 segment lacked action. We focused more on the weigh-in when really, Anthony should have gone screw that, smacked Cody Rhodes right in the face. When Paul White started to struggle with the scales though, this just went on and on. Why we didn't just make up a number, I don't know. It's wrestling. You can say whatever you want. We likely should have had Ogogo win at the Double or Nothing match too, but sadly soon after, the former boxer wasn't featured as much, and that's silly. Because I've seen this dude up close and personal, so let's hope 2024 is the year for him. All he needs is another opportunity, and I tell you, man will fly. Number 7, Keith Bearcat Lee. I still don't get this, and it was years ago. It was like we hired Keith Lee to not be Keith Lee. It's like getting mad at me when I turned up bald. What were you expecting? It began on the 27th of September 2021 Raw, though, when Keith had a match with Tozawa and squashed him as the Bearcat. Everybody double took when he was announced that way. What was happening? He was allowed to keep wrecking falls for a while, but once again it was clear he'd been told to tone it down. Not one person told us why this was his gimmick now. There was no reasoning at all. WWE soon realized the error of their ways and slowed things right down. Rather than make it right, they let Keith go in November. It was just stupid. Very sadly, soon afterwards, Lee suffered some serious health issues, so hopefully today, he is doing better. That's all that really matters. Wrestling will always be secondary to somebody's well-being. But that said, we should not have done any of this. Number 6, Rikishi did it for The Rock. Excuse me, Da Rock. This was all-time nonsense. It's a shame as the Who ran over Steve Austin storyline was actually quite intriguing, and picking Rikishi wasn't the worst idea. The man was super over, and you know what they say, if you turn heel when you have all the momentum as a good guy, sometimes it works perfectly. This was not one of those times. It was just a lack of justification because Big Keish kept telling us he did it for The Rock. But why did he do it for The Rock? This was in 2000, and I still don't know. If you do actually watch the Raws from this period too, for a small time, WWE hinted this could be racially motivated. before realizing that was a very bad idea when they threw it out the window and put the blame on Triple H instead. Come on. It left Rikishi in the worst position because we took the focus off the man and he was just hanging out in limbo. He was sort of a heel, but also not. Panicking, the powers that be then tried to make him the fun-loving dancing dude again, but they'd ruined that too. This was so poorly thought out. It never got back to where it was, and really we should have just sat down and figured this out. We didn't. You know the rest. Number 5, the Shockmaster stumbles. So, you will be hard pushed to find a character that died as quickly as this. By my takings, it was less than 5 seconds. Incredible. It has become part of wrestling folklore now, though, because yep, when Fred Ottman tried to smash through a wall in his new gimmick, he tripped over some flooring he didn't see. It looked so ridiculous the British Bulldog couldn't stop laughing. Even if we had gotten away with this, the Shockmaster was still just going to be a big dude wearing a sparkly Stormtrooper helmet. And what was that? Surely they were going to get sued by Star Wars. There was no coming back from this, although WCW did try and rebook him as a bumbling fool, but that was never going to work. You can't reclaim the joke. It meant we just ended it in a matter of weeks, although fair play to the former Typhoon. He still travels the convention circuit today making money off this. And there's a nice ending to the tale. Number 4, Medusa bins the WWF Women's title. In terms of shocking TV, this is right up there. If you were flicking between Raw and Nitro back in the day and saw Medusa on WCW TV drop a WWF title in the bin, well, you lost it. It felt like a war. Medusa herself has talked about how this derailed her career, because once World Championship Wrestling was gone, she had no home. McMahon was so offended by this, he never invited her back. It's not like WCW used her all that well either, and thankfully she did get a Hall of Fame nod in 2015. But what did Alundra Blaze have to talk about then, though? This incident, it just took over. I suppose you can argue that it was so momentous that it will stand the test of time. Still not all that sure it was a great idea, mine. Number 3, Dr. Death loses it all in the Brawl for All. It does feel like somebody new learns about this every day, so yes, the Brawl for All was a stupid idea because it was shoot fighting in a predetermined world, which just told you everything else on the card was worked. It was so short-sighted. The whole plan, though, was to turn Dr. Death Steve Williams into a real killer so he could feud with one Steve Austin. And that's fine on paper, but again, this was 2 people legit trying to hurt each other. You never know what could happen. So when Williams hurt his hamstring mid-scrap, one Bart Gunn and his boxing background exploited this and knocked Steve out bad. I mean, it was kind of a mauling. It took any program with Stone Cold off the table because he had been beaten so badly, Dr. Death couldn't portray himself as a tough guy he'd made a career out of. What were we thinking? It didn't help Bart either, who got tonked at WrestleMania by pro boxer Butterbean, to in the future, if you want to book a brawler, just let them win matches. You do have that power, for goodness sake. Number 2, Bret Hart leaves the WWF. The more you read into it, it really does feel like Bret Hart didn't have a choice. Vince McMahon had told him he wasn't going to live up to the terms of his contract, and that he should take the WCW offer that was on the table. Not going to do much for your confidence, is it? It also followed the Montreal screw job, which was a horrible situation, but even then, it was the hottest thing in wrestling, and WCW could have capitalized on this if they wanted to. They did not. Instead, the Hitman arrived as a referee in the Hulk Hogan Sting World title match, and from there, we had no idea what to do with Bret. I'm sure backstage politics played a role, but this was so dumb. Everybody wanted to see what Hart was going to do. Very sadly, Bret then got injured as his career came to an end. That was not fitting of such a legend. Yeah, it kinda sucked. Didn't take away from what he achieved, however. The man just deserved better. Number 1, Vader irks Shawn Michaels. If you've ever wondered why there's a lot of stories about Shawn Michaels version 1, here you go. At SummerSlam 1996, the WWF decided Vader would be a great opponent for HBK because Vader was a killer. Every promotion he'd ever worked in, he wrecked fools, so fans believed the hype. A large reason for this is because the real-life Leon White would work quite snug, however. And do you know who didn't like that? Shawn Michaels. If you go and watch this now, you can see the Heartbreak Kid audibly chastising him. And after the match was done, apparently Michael stormed backstage and said as far as he was concerned, Vader was done. He was right. Somehow he got in the ear of management, and within 2 years, Vader had been reduced to walking out on television and telling the audience he was nothing but a fat piece of shit. Yep, that's what we had him say. Once he left, everybody agreed this was the worst version of the character, when thankfully he was able to revive his career by going back to what he had been doing beforehand, ruining folk. When it does come to the WWF, however, yeah, that was done. We never really got the Vader that we wanted. We all know that a debut in WWE can make or break you. I mean, go back to WrestleMania 41, Joe Hendry turned up and totally changed the game. I know everybody wanted to talk about him being buried, but go look at the statistics, the numbers, I think he's gonna do all right. Sadly though, this is not always the way, and while I'm sure the intentions are good, poor individuals get saddled with such stupid gimmicks, well, it's already the beginning of the end. So let us go through 15 of these. My name is Simon Miller. Sit down and let's go. Number 15, Mordecai Huffs and Puffs. So Mordecai, when he was coming into the WWE, got the big old treatment because there were a ton of vignettes, and it was made very clear eventually this guy is wanting to go face to face with The Undertaker. I mean, that's not a bad plan to have. Judgment Day 2004 is when he popped up in the ring for the first time, and he took on Scotty 2 Hotty. Of course, he got the decisive win on pay-per-view, and everybody was like, all right, here we go. Because while Mordecai versus Scotty 2 Hotty only lasted around 3 minutes, there was an issue in the sense that management felt like the heel had sold too much, especially because he was meant to be a monster. In interviews ever since, the real-life Kevin Fertig, who was behind the character, explained that he was caught between trying to work an Undertaker slow plays, oh my gosh, I'm a zombie now, while also accepting it was 2004, we gotta pick it up the pace. In the end, it just meant that he didn't come across as the special entity that the hierarchy had hoped. And you know the deal. If you don't do exactly what you're meant to do on day one, well, it's a little bit of an upwards battle. Judgment Day went down in May, and if you can believe it, Mordecai was back in developmental by July. I mean, that's like 2 months. It's only fair to say that Michael Cole and Taz on commentary did their best to get him over, and also he really should have been given a round 2. I mean, you know what can happen sometimes. You try and hit a home run, and instead you strike out. WWE did not do Mordecai any favors either, though, because surely somebody must have gone to Scotty 2 Hotty and said, hey bro, you gotta get some licks in. And imagine it the other way. Mordecai gets in the ring, and he hit that weird Razor's Edge style finish within 10 seconds. More people probably would have taken notice. The gimmick was always going to be a struggle too because it was so much like the Dead Man. And yeah, soon after this he was gone. It was not ideal. Number 14, Johnny Curtis literally cries over spilled milk. Original NXT rookie Johnny Curtis made his first main roster appearance in a backstage skit on the 3rd of June 2011 episode of SmackDown. All of this was supposed to bring a closure to his NXT story arc and give us a wink wink nudge nudge that maybe one day he was going to come Fandango. I mean, he wasn't quite the ballroom dancer yet, but even then, surely we could get this correct. Well, the answer is no, because on this SmackDown debut, he bemoaned the fact he wasn't getting a promised tag title shot alongside R-Truth by quite literally crying over some spilled milk. That's right, he was given a gag, and nobody thought this was funny. Curtis even had to pour this milk into a big saucer and then tip it over, and yes, he was actually pretending to cry. What's even worse is that if you didn't watch NXT, you'd have no idea what the narrative between Curtis and R-Truth was, so you'd just be sat there scratching your head. How could you possibly have invested in it? The date is important because in 2011, Vince McMahon was desperate to try and show that all of his wrestlers did have some sort of personality, and yes, most of the time we did have to have awkward skits like this. Most of them did feel forced, and if you wonder where the stereotype of why can't NXT rookies get caught up properly, well, it all started around here. To say it was counterproductive is an understatement, which is why it is a plus he found Fandango. I hate to think what would happen otherwise. Number 13, Sin Cara botches his entrance. Sin Cara is always going to be a fascinating case study when it comes to the WWE, because he was Triple H's first signing after the game had taken over talent relations. The former Mystico in CMLL is obviously incredibly talented too, but very sadly, come the 11th of April, well, it all went bad during his debut. Because Cara got off to the worst start when trying to jump on a trampoline to get into the ring, because it didn't go exactly to plan, and he got tangled up in the ropes. Now imagine you are seeing the man for the first time, kind of just made you raise an eyebrow. It got even worse because of course WWE was known for this kind of comedy, so some individuals thought this was part of the plan, and that maybe Cara was meant to be a joke character. He was not. Things only got worse from there, I suppose, because his confidence was hit, because every single time he was in the ring, it was like he was cursed, something would always go wrong. Before long, there was definitely a separation between WWE and Sin Cara because they just could not get on the same page, and when eventually things did calm down, well yeah, it was too little and too late. His matches just didn't feel special at all. I admit the first time I saw Sin Cara's entrance live, I was totally blown away by it, because I didn't even realize he was using a trampoline. Yep, I thought he had enough power in his legs to jump over the top rope, and that makes me an idiot. In hindsight, that probably would have helped here. And thankfully, ever since Mystico has gone back down to Mexico and refound his feet, pretty probably doesn't want to talk about the WWE stint ever again. Number 12, Edge injures his opponent during his debut. So the WWF, as it was at the time, must have seen a lot in Adam Copeland, because before he did debut on TV, we got a lot of video packages. Now, originally the gimmick pitched by Vince Russo was to have Edge as a mute. Thankfully, eventually somebody realized we can't do that because a lot of wrestling is talking. This brings us to the 22nd of June 1998 Raw, when Edge did make his debut. And man, this did not go to plan. Edge was facing wrestling journeyman Jose Estrada Jr., and after a dive went wrong, well, he hurt his neck. Given that an injury like this has to be taken care of, the match was cut short, mostly because Estrada was too injured to continue. So of course, health and happiness foremost, but just take a minute to step into Adam Copeland's shoes. Can you imagine how worried he must have been? He had just accidentally hurt somebody on his first appearance. He probably thought his days were done. Thankfully, Jose was able to bounce back from this eventually and start wrestling again, and we all know the deal with Edge. He went on to have a Hall of Fame-worthy career and won a bunch of world championships and main evented WrestleMania. So there's some inspiration for everybody listening. Even if you do trip up at first, the future can be bright. Number 11, Emelina, Waste Your Time. So let's just go into the statistics. WWE made fans sit through approximately 17 weeks of vignettes promising that Emma was about to become Emelina. The day finally arrived on the 13th of February 2017 Raw, when Emelina walked out the day before Valentine's Day and said, "You know what, I've changed my mind, I don't know what to do this anymore." She went back through the curtain, and yep, she was just Emma again. As we would soon learn, WWE chiefs had decided that Emma wasn't able to pull this character off, but that one doesn't make any sense, and it's 2 + 2 = potato. At least give her a chance and then let her work on the damn thing. This just felt like one massive troll, and yeah, like we said in the title, was an utter waste of everybody's time, including WWE's. Think if you were the director behind all those videos as well, you'd be like, well, why did I even do that? You'd be lying on your deathbed, and that would be sticking out in your brain. If nothing else, it did no favors for Emma, because she was never really able to get back to where she was, mostly because the fans were asking the question, well, what the hell happened here? It's really not protecting your talent or actually sitting down or working with them, which was absolutely a problem with the old WWE. I think these days they'd actually find a way to make it click. But yeah, this was not a good debut. Number 10, Brandon Walker's Knock Knock joke. Ex-TNA standout Chris Harris must have been over the moon when he signed with WWE in 2008. Not only had he had a great run in total non-stop action, but the fans were most definitely in his corner. They wanted him to succeed. He was eventually introduced by ECW GM Teddy Long during a backstage skit on the 8th of July episode, when he did indeed have a chat with former GM Armando Estrada. Now, the first error we made here was calling Chris Brandon Walker. Not trying to be horrible, but that's the most generic name I've ever heard, and sounds like it came straight out of WWE 2K25. What made it even worse, though, is that Walker was scripted to tell a knock-knock joke to Estrada, which went, "Knock knock, who's there? Brandon Walker, and I'm going to knock your brains out." Okay, thanks for telling me. Walker didn't deliver this with any real aggression in his voice either, and also, it's a knock-knock joke. So unless you're trying to get over 6-year-olds, I do not think this was the way. Incredibly too, Brandon Walker's adventure on ECW lasted only 2 matches before all of it got canned. There were a few other backstage skits where he just went around introducing himself to people, and I tell you, my friends, that was that. WWE soon decided they had made a mistake, and he never even got a chance to rectify it. You can go back and watch all these and look at Chris Harris's face. He visibly hates his own gimmick. He soon was out the company too, and honestly, talk about not even giving the dude a chance. This was another one that was just so stupid. Number 9, Hector Guerrero hatches as the gobbledygooker. So this one has been talked over and over again, but when it comes to bad debuts, well, how the flub can you ignore it? Hector Guerrero did burst out of a giant egg at the Survivor Series 1990, and he was indeed dubbed the gobbledygooker. Now, do not get this wrong, my friends. Vince McMahon wanted this giant turkey to be the mascot of the World Wrestling Federation. He had seen the likes of Mario and Sonic doing it for Nintendo and Sega and tried to follow suit, but who the hell came up with this one? The Undertaker has talked about this as well because he debuted on the same show, and he was actually terrified that he would be the giant Eggman. I mean, if that doesn't sum it up. Thankfully for Hector, at least he was hidden under a mask, but this did not do him any favors. And also, even kids thought this was dumb. So what do you think adults made of it? The funniest part is that when Gene Okerlund did actually introduce the gobbledygooker, he said it like it was some massive star that we would all recognize. Obviously, in 2025, we all know that it was the opposite, and genuinely is one of the worst ideas in wrestling history. I mean, talk about insult to the fans. This thing was built up for weeks when a giant turkey man hatched from the thing. I'd love to say that the WWF never did anything like this again, but that would be a lie. They did it all the time. Number 8, Friar Ferguson is a mad monk. The real-life Mike Shaw had an all-time run of questionable gimmicks throughout WCW and WWF, but what he did here was undoubtedly one of the worst. Firstly, Vince McMahon brought him in as Friar Ferguson and debuted the religious gimmick on the 12th of April 1993 Raw. There he beat enhancement worker Chris Duffy in what was supposed to be a short and sweet intro. Now yes, this gimmick was meant to be cartoony, but that didn't stop the Catholic Church, who actually got in touch with the WWF and said, yeah, maybe you should stop doing this. It was one of those situations when even the company realized they were fighting a losing battle, so they decided to change the character. And do you know what they came up with? Bastion Booger. It is not hard to work out that was not an improvement on the Friar, because the whole point of Bastion was he was meant to be a slovenly glutton who didn't wash. I mean, I can't see that guy headlining WrestleMania. Really though, it all goes back to how he did debut as the Mad Monk, who was meant to have wrestling skills, because that sounds like something that would come out of a Disney cartoon. This first squash match didn't really do anything for anybody either, and you could tell that Ferguson was sort of struggling with his knees. Probably shouldn't have been in the ring to begin with. So it was just a bad idea that got worse and worse and created a bunch of controversy. You'll be not surprised to hear this one didn't last very long either. Number 7, Retribution changed literally nothing. So during the COVID pandemic era, WWE thought they should come up with a brand new group, which is why on the 3rd of August 2020, Revolution debuted by setting fire to a generator. We were then told they were nothing more than a bunch of thugs. Here was Revolution. Days later on SmackDown, they beat up some officials and cut the ring ropes with a chainsaw. And listen, I can't tell you any more about that. I don't know why they did it. Soon the members did explain to us that they were sick and tired of being overlooked on NXT and wanted WWE contracts when we gave them names such as Slapjack and T-Bar. I mean, why on earth were they never taken serious by the WWE Universe? There was also a massive plot hole in this because clearly they had contracts. Otherwise, how would they be on television to begin with? Now, when you go through the individuals in the stable, there was mad potential here, but WWE just gave them such a dumb story. And even when Mustafa Ali was revealed to be the leader, we would just not allow them any time to actually make this work. Come the end of the year, most were describing it as one of 2020's weakest storylines, and really that does come down to the creative team. You'd pick people here that knew what they were doing, but then put them in stupid masks and told them to say things that didn't make any sense. It affected their standing within the company too, to the point most got released. So honestly, let's never ever do anything like this again. Number 6, Karrion Kross becomes a joke. No matter what you thought of Karrion Kross down in NXT, he was booked wonderfully. He was the NXT champion for ages and with just school fools, he was very fun and exciting to watch. That's why it made no sense when he did debut on the 19th of July 2021 episode of Raw and instantly lost to Jeff Hardy in around about 2 minutes. Afterwards, he was also exasperated and sort of mumbling about revenge. And if you had watched NXT, you were like, well, this isn't the Karrion Kross I know. What the flub are we doing? Jump forward to the 23rd of August Raw, and poor Kross also had to come out in a helmet and suspenders and looked a little bit like he was a gimp. Don't get mad at me, that's what everybody else said. It was absolutely terrible, mostly because Vince McMahon didn't know anything about NXT and essentially tampered with things just to wind other people up. Karrion Kross then lost all his credibility because of this, meaning we had to start again. I mean, honestly, this is one of the stupidest things we've ever done. The fans knew this too and got even more mad when Scarlett was removed from Kross's side, and come the 4th of November, he was released. No wonder wrestlers get so mad about this stuff. What else was he meant to do? Thankfully, when the WWE did shift its managerial structure, he was brought back in August 2022, although it's only really now we're finally seeing his potential. But yeah, go back and watch all this, especially when he came out in his weird Krang gear. I have no idea what Vince McMahon was thinking. This one was just bad. Number 5, LA Knight is Max Dupree. So all things considered, LA Knight probably could have made this work because he just gets it. But at the same time, look at the star he is today. Why the hell was the main roster not trying to do this to begin with? Well, I can explain it to you. It's because the Maximum Male models had recently debuted on SmackDown. So somebody decided they needed a mouthpiece and a manager, and they gave that slot to the called up LA Knight, and they called him Max Dupree. This was the 20th of May 2022, and just go watch any of these skits. Poor Max Dupree is essentially dragging himself through this. I He does make the best of bad material, but it was never going to work out. The WWE did not treat any of them right either, because Mansoir and Marseille were doing excellent stuff here, and yet the machine never got properly behind them. It soon came out that Vince McMahon was not happy with Max Dupree's work, and that he was actually thinking of letting him go. I mean, why somebody didn't just show him a tape of NXT, I do not know. But yeah, eventually Triple H did take over, and LA Knight was reborn on the main roster, and surprise, surprise, it has been a massive success. So if something is working in your developmental brand, maybe just do that on Raw and SmackDown, and don't come up with a stupid idea. Number 4, fake Diesel and fake Razor Ramon. Poor Jim Ross on the 30th of September Raw 1996 had to pretend that Kevin Nash and Scott Hall were coming back to the company. This was a half lie. I mean, Diesel and Razor Ramon were going to return, but they were now played by completely different people. These poor roles went to Rick Bogner and Glenn Jacobs, who of course in the future would be Kane. And this is genuinely because Vince McMahon had decided nobody cares about the human being behind the mask, they just want to see the gimmick. Once again, he was totally incorrect. Mostly the audience felt like they had been tricked here because it was a massive troll, and it made JR look like a damn fool. He had to pretend these were the real guys. All you need to do is go and rewatch their debut and listen to the fans. It was like a balloon had been popped in the arena. They had all bought into this idea that, oh my gosh, Nash and Hall were going to come back, and instead we got 2 imposters. Poor Bogner was never able to overcome this in the World Wrestling Federation, and if it wasn't for The Undertaker needing a new opponent, who the flub knows what would have happened to Glenn Jacobs. It really does come down to the fact that the WWF and WCW were feuding at every single turn. But yeah, this is another one. Let's never do it again. It served absolutely nobody. Number 3, it's Christian. The 10th of February 2009 episode of ECW was in full swing when from nowhere, Christian returned. This was a major comeback for Captain Charisma because he had spent several years doing excellent work in TNA, and now he was back to try and win a world heavyweight title. All of this should have been absolutely fine until you learn what Vince McMahon told then ECW announcer Todd Grisham. Because everybody was stunned when Christian did walk out, and he quite literally just said, it's Christian. It's like somebody had just received a bill in the mail. He could not have been less enthused. As it turns out, it all comes down to the fact that Vince McMahon never really was into the Christian character and therefore tried to mug him off. If you were watching at the time, though, you should have been livid, because Christian was meant to play a part in the ongoing feud between Edge and Jeff Hardy. That would have served as a wonderful surprise, but because the news leaked to the internet, Vince McMahon changed it to Matt Hardy, who turned heel at the Royal Rumble. And trust me, I was watching at the time, and this one also didn't make any sense. Thankfully, things have worked out well for Christian in the long term, and his stint in AEW has proved to everybody he is all-time. But he must have been livid here. Everybody wants a great WWE return and comeback with the bells and whistles, and instead he got, it's Christian. Number 2, Lord Tensai has no chance. When Matt Bloom moved to wrestle in Japan after his first WWE stint, he reminded everybody, oh yeah, I'm a really good big man. He did such fine work, eventually he got the call to come back to the WWE, when he did re-debut on the 2nd of April 2012 episode of Raw. He was also allowed to run through the Miz's protege Alex Riley to send a message that he was going straight for the main event. Although we had a problem, we were calling him Lord Tensai, even though everybody knew this used to be Albert. Therefore, during this fight, all the crowd did was chant Albert, 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 and some people even said, why don't you shave your back? Because yes, before all of this, he was a very hairy man. You also have to ask the question why he had Japanese writing all over his face, and I would suppose it was because he did go to Japan, and that's all Vince McMahon could come up with. He was also programmed to feud with John Cena, but I can tell you that didn't get anywhere, because this was just a flop of a character. We should have just brought Matt Bloom back as Matt Bloom and let him run through people. Instead, we had to give him an over-the-top gimmick. Before long, he had become a comedy character as he teamed with Brodus Clay, which is why today I'm glad he's in the NXT Performance Center and absolutely smashing it. Bloom clearly has lots to give to the wrestling industry, but you have to give him good creative to allow him to shine. We never did that, which is why I implore you today to go to Japan and watch his Giant Bernard stuff. You will not believe it. It is a total 180. Number 1, DDP is the stalker. So please do get this straight. When WCW was smashing all records and was on top of the wrestling industry, Diamond Dallas Page was a major reason for that. People love this guy. When he won his first world champion too, there was genuine joy in the crowd, which begs the question what the hell Vince McMahon was thinking when eventually he jumped ship to the WWE. This was after WCW had been bought out and Dallas had years left on his contract, but he wanted to make something on himself, so yeah, he opted out early and debuted on Raw on the 18th of June 2001. 2001. He got a massive pop when he removed his mask as well, before we all realized, oh my gosh, he is actually going to be the stalker who was going after The Undertaker's wife. Because before all this, we had seen somebody in the bushes of The Undertaker's property quite literally stalking him and his wife, and it really was just too much for fans to believe. Everybody knew that DDP was one of the best guys going. Why the hell would he choose to do this? It got even worse when they eventually got into the match because The Undertaker absolutely killed this guy. And dare I say it, Vince McMahon did not know what he had. It really did feel like there was some sort of worry that maybe DDP would be more over than the official WWF guys, but who the hell cares? We were all going to be on the same team at the end of the day, and as a massive Page fan, this still stings. It was not the right thing to do, and I'm going to say it one last time, it was really, really stupid.
Either due to simply not getting behind the idea as much as they should have, failing to adapt to what the audience were clearly telling them, or not fully thinking the plan through before unleashing it into the world of sports entertainment. All of these weird and wonderful ideas well and truly failed. Either way, I'm Gareth, this is WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are some fascinating WWE ideas that flopped hard. Main roster DIY. Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa will forever be recognized as two of the greatest performers ever to grace an NXT ring. As part of the Black and Gold brand, both as a DIY unit and single stars in their own right, the world-class workers frequently blew the roof off of arenas and helped make the developmental show the hottest product in all of wrestling at one point, so fans simply could not wait for the moment the pair finally made their jump up to the big time. But they were made to wait, and wait, and wait. And by the time both lads were officially called up, that once intriguing concept of DIY taking Raw or SmackDown by storm sadly just felt like a case of too little too late. After doing very little to make current fans give a damn about this latest addition to the Red Brand's tag roster, DIY have ultimately become another pair of occasionally exciting bodies just lost in the shuffle. Raw Underground. Raw Underground had the makings of a quite fascinating addition to Monday nights. Having various savage WWE workers obliterate jobbers in these MMA/Fight Club inspired squashes did briefly make the likes of Braun Strowman, Shayna Baszler, and the Hurt Business feel like talent not to be messed with. And if WWE dropped the silly music in the background, kept Shayna away from a mic, and maybe chucked in a few more intriguing sprint-style matches between more equally matched fighters, perhaps this underground idea would have been remembered as more than just another pandemic-era swing and a miss. Raw Underground was cancelled after just a few months. There was definitely potential in a gritty, sprint-stuffed corner of the Red Show though, but Raw Underground's dumb attempts to be cool and edgy ultimately flopped hard. Stone Cold turns to the dark side. After the unbelievable conclusion to WrestleMania X7, even those who immediately felt turning the iconic Stone Cold Steve Austin fully heel was a foolish call were at least a little bit curious about what the future held for the baddest SOB in the business. In the weeks and months that followed Austin toppling The Rock with a little help from the devil himself though, it was painfully obvious that no matter how hard this Texas rattlesnake tried, he was never going to be entirely rejected. Outside of a few moments of backstage comedy gold opposite Kurt Angle, the unstable Menace's walk on the dark side ultimately became one of the biggest failures in company history. And as the also hugely disappointing storyline flop that was The Invasion finally reached its end at Survivor Series 2001, WWE wisely wrapped up the villainous Austin experiment too, but the damage had already been done. Now after talking about all this Austin heel turn nonsense, I want to know what your favorite heel turn of all time was. Let me know in the comment section down below. Raw guest hosts. Throwing a little bit of star power from outside of the world of wrestling onto WWE programming can lead to some incredibly bizarre but undeniably brilliant television. However, as highlighted throughout the massively hit and miss Raw guest host era, if said guests hadn't the slightest clue or interest in the business they were stepping into for a few hours, the end result could be disastrous. For every wonderful instance of worlds colliding when the likes of Shaquille O'Neal and Bob Barker took on the authority role for the evening, there was unfortunately an excruciating Jeremy Piven or Ricky Hatton appearance right around the corner. An initially quite fascinating concept ultimately made Monday night a consistently tough watch, thanks to way too many disinterested, awkward, or unwanted guests. Tribal Combat. Despite a rather divisive WrestleMania 39 ending, the Bloodline saga still felt unquestionably hot heading into SummerSlam 2023. 2023. What made this particular stepped-up war between the two so intriguing this time around was the fact said rule stated that no one could interfere in the action until the no DQ battle was over, seemingly killing any chances of yet another shenanigans-stuffed Roman Reigns title defense. Fans were eventually put through the longest bloodline epic yet, as that aforementioned interference rule was hilariously broken not once but twice. Tribal combat could have been a brutal and honorable end to yet another gripping chapter, but eventually just went down in history as a flop of a contest that very nearly derailed the entire saga. Cheers for checking out this video today, you legends, and if you like what you see, then go and tap on that subscribe button down below. The electric chair. Back in 2019, it was somewhat rare to witness a WWE performer deliver words on the mic that were not painfully and heavily scripted beforehand. So when Sami Zayn hopped onto a now somewhat infamous electric chair, the potential was there for the beginning of something special and quite refreshing. A few questions into the debut of the electric chair though, it was obvious Zayn wasn't going to be provoked into creating a controversial piece of television by an audience who were more concerned about his retirement date than creating headlines. Not even Sami dropping in a cheeky nod to the All Elite competition could save the dud of a segment in the end. The Nexus. Wade Barrett and the rest of his NXT pals became a super hot act overnight on June 7, 2010. And if the plan was to swiftly create a bunch of potential new main event sensations capable of carrying the company forward, then things were looking fairly strong in the months leading up to SummerSlam 2010. But then it happened. Rather than officially establish the squad as a genuine threat by having them come out on top in their match against Team WWE, Cena reportedly pushed to overcome the hot up-and-coming stars on the night. And from there, that bold, exciting idea of a fierce band of brothers soon completely unraveled, as Nexus ultimately failed to recapture their momentum or heat over the next year or so post-Cena winning LOL. The Cruiserweight Division / 205 Live. The Cruiserweight Classic injected an otherwise horrendously tired WWE product with a bit of life back in 2016, gathering together some of the brightest talents on planet Earth to compete in a thrilling 32-person tournament. The future actually looked quite bright for those WWE fans fond of highly technical and outrageously athletic in-ring action. And in the wake of crowning the inaugural Cruiserweight champion, or at least the first one who would carry around a belt not won by Hornswoggle, WWE decided to chuck their high-flying wrestling machines onto the red brand. But rather than unleashing that glorious Cruiserweight Classic energy during their Raw segments each and every week, the likes of TJ Perkins, Cedric Alexander, and the rest of the exciting names involved were regularly given little time to properly connect with the main roster crowd. This half-assed Cruiserweight revival was looking like a frustrating flop even before the often overlooked 205 Live eventually stumbled onto screens. An ECW brand. After successfully reviving the rebellious property known as ECW for two separate and utterly thrilling one-night stands, Vince McMahon decided to properly bring back the Land of Extreme in 2006. On paper, the concept of producing a fresh show containing names like Rob Van Dam, The Sandman, and Tommy Dreamer colliding with exciting up-and-comers like CM Punk seemed like a riveting one. But with McMahon having final say on what appeared on this sci-fi program, it wasn't long before the true spirit of the hardcore company was drained from this new WWE ECW brand. Hardcore contests were replaced by standard rules, and main event spots were given to totally extreme rebels like The Big Show and Batista. One that saw both men getting booed out of the Hammerstein Ballroom by exasperated fans. Things somehow got worse. A dreadful December to Dismember pay-per-view and Vince stupidly lifting the ECW title were just a few of the other embarrassing things that occurred during the spell that saw the Extreme Playground become little more than a sad flop of a C-show. And finally, the SmackDown hacker. Ali seemed poised to break out on a number of occasions over the years, but perhaps the most infuriating missed opportunity of the star's career went down in the middle of those dark pandemic days. Midway through 2020, a mysterious hacker began showing up on SmackDown, threatening to expose various stars' secrets and bring the truth to WWE programming as they sat in a hoodie in front of a ton of monitors somewhere. And then, after a few months of compelling teases, nothing. Even when WWE did finally bother to acknowledge the fact Ali, who'd become the leader of the Doom Squad known as Retribution by then, was the man in the chair all along, they opted to just have him drop that massive revelation into a hugely forgettable backstage promo on Raw in October 2020. That would also end up being the last fans heard of the hacker on WWE programming too. What a flop.
I do not like the word flopped. I've ruined the video already, but it's true. The machine can always get behind you and something clicks. I mean, technically Steve Austin was a so-called flop when he joined the then WWF. I think that turned out alright. So let us just switch it to those who are still waiting to find their wings even after WWE tried. I believe in you though, damn it. I am Simon Miller, and let's go. Number 10, Austin Theory. I mean, you can hear me talk about this on my Ups and Downs reviews. We just need to treat Austin Theory a little bit differently. I get that he's easy to hate because he's a looker and carved out of stone, but do you remember what he did on NXT? That's the Theory I want on the main roster. Just a bit of a lovable goof. I think Triple H realizes this because he was pulling the NXT strings then, and we have teased turning Austin for what feels like years now. I think when we try properly, it's gonna work. If nothing else, none of this was really his fault, because when it was time to go hard, what did we do? We told Theory his story was all about a giant gold egg. It's not a joke either. That is what we chose to do. Pray tell why this failed to catch on. So sure, it's fair to say round one was not as expected, and that US title run wasn't great, but I believe, like Bo Dallas, watch this space. Number 9, Wardlow. It just doesn't make sense. I would say on at least 2 occasions we were good to go with Wardlow, and we didn't follow through. I don't want to speculate as I don't know, but it is weird. These days, he's not even on TV. Now, this could be an injury, but it still makes it all very sad. Wardlow felt like a guy who could offer something different for AEW, but it was such a stop-start push. I'm not sure anyone felt like they could truly get behind him. I suppose we fell into a pattern because Wardlow went from group to group to group, and every time it was ready to hit, we just didn't. After a while, it is boy that cried wolf. You stop believing in it. I think you can get one more proper push with Ward, but you have to go all the way. If not, maybe it's time to let him go and try elsewhere. I mean, I think somebody can definitely use this guy. Number 8, Alberto Del Rio. So it is not easy to talk about Alberto Del Rio. Go and Google, that is a horrible story. The truth is though, when WWE brought him in, they wanted Del Rio to be their new Mexican babyface. Given he had size, management were even more excited. You know the deal. Rey Mysterio is too small. So stupid. Every time we did try this, however, it did not work. Alberto was never accepted as a good guy, and while his heel run was alright, it wasn't at the level those in charge wanted. Then we got rid of Ricardo Rodriguez, which was an integral part of the act. We did it all wrong. Del Rio was also the dude that used his Money in the Bank briefcase to stop CM Punk's title reign in 2011. That was really dumb. Nobody should have done that. The less said about we the people, the better, and yeah, WWE honestly thought Alberto would be a WrestleMania main eventer. He was not. Number 7, Sin Cara. So it always sounds like there was some political warfare when it came to the debut of Sin Cara. He was touted as Triple H's first major signing as he took over his talent relations role. Maybe, just maybe, Vince McMahon wanted to make his life more difficult. Sin Cara himself allegedly didn't help as he walked around backstage like a star. You know how that goes in wrestling. You just irk others and put a target on your back. It then got worse because, be it nerves or whatever, Sin made one too many mistakes in the ring. Even on his first match, he tripped during his entrance. WWE has always been notorious for holding that against you if other factors are at play. There were attempts to sort this in the sense the former Mystico was teamed with Rey Mysterio for a while, which I assume was meant to be a passing of the torch moment, but before long they cut their losses, got rid of Mystico, and put Hunico in his place. Don't worry about Mystico though, because he did fine. He went back to Mexico and continued to be a megastar. Number 6, Nathan Jones. Too much, too soon. That is the story here. You can find this narrative constantly throughout the years too, so it's amazing Vince McMahon didn't learn. Just because somebody is massive doesn't mean they need to be on the main roster instantly. The rumors have always said management would try and hijack dudes from the boss because they knew what would happen otherwise. I suppose Nathan Jones was just too gargantuan. Vince saw the 8x10s and here came the big push. The issue was Jones wasn't ready to be on the main roster, and even the powers that be figured that one out. WrestleMania 19's proposed tag team match of The Undertaker and Nathan saw Jones get pulled at the last minute, and for a good while all he did was run-ins. Soon the big Australian fell out with the travel schedule too, and I would assume when you can feel the tide turning, you just check out. That's exactly what happened. With more time, who knows what the story would be today, although if you do care, Nathan Jones went on to have a pretty decent career in Hollywood. That is not too shabby. Number 5, Ronda Rousey. Now I would say the jury is still out on this one. It all depends how you look at it. Ronda herself has talked about how she would have preferred the Logan Paul treatment when it came to her matches, in the sense she would be allowed to rehearse beforehand. The difference was Rousey was basically a full-timer for a while, and there's no time for a run-through when you're on the road making towns. It's why the super pros called it in the ring when they had to. It's a very demanding industry. Her first run was pretty good, and that Mania debut was awesome, and even the weird Becky Lynch-Charlotte Flair triple threat was fine. We just overcooked the pudding, and the finish didn't work. It was when Ronda returned for round 2 that it never really clicked. Rousey pitched idea after idea to those in charge who clearly saw things differently. Therefore, the on-screen fallout felt off. I mean, just go and listen to any Ronda interview about this. She was not happy. I still think she brought new eyes to the WWE, so you can't say it was a total bust. Just feels like she needed to be approached in a certain way, and that didn't happen, which I kinda get. She wasn't an experienced wrestler with years of reps under her belt. There's also the whole should she have been a good guy or should she have been a bad guy discussion. What a wild time this was. And before Jack Swagger. WWE must have done something right with Jack Swagger. I love the guy. This was way back in 2011 when I was already doing wrestling podcasts. I would get behind him every single week. He was slightly goofy, but it worked. Swagger made himself stand out. The problem was after he won the Money in the Bank briefcase at Mania 26 and cashed it in to become the world champion, he was never actually pushed like a world champion. That old chestnut. Instead, like many before him, Jack was given what was considered the secondary major title, and therefore lost this allure. If you want fans to believe in somebody as the guy, you have to treat them like the guy. That's basic mathematics. We've already mentioned the We the People stuff, as Swagger was caught up in that too. And just in case you did miss it, it was not good. Jim Ross was certainly somebody high on this man, but yeah, he only had an okay run in WWE, and there really was a time when it felt like we were going to make a proper go at it. We didn't. Number 3, Mr. Kennedy. Sorry. So this one was good to go. Not only was Ken Kennedy going to get the push, but everybody was behind this. He could work, he could talk, he was over, let's get it on. Vince McMahon was impressed too and got the Money in the Bank briefcase on him, and at one point he was going to be Vince's son. And that would have been a stupid storyline, but hey, it does mean you're going to be focused on quite heavily. And then, man, it all went bad. Soon after getting the magic case, Kennedy got injured and lost it to Edge, when we learned that this was an error. His shoulder was not as bad as first thought. Whoops. As soon as that was done, he was caught up in a wellness policy suspension, and then he ran afoul of John Cena and Randy Orton. Apparently they thought he was unsafe in the ring. This was 2009, and I suppose a telling off from the main eventers was enough for WWE to change their mind, and Kenneth was let go. This really was crazy. We all thought he was going to be the champ. He did have a decent run in TNA, but let's be honest, when he was doing that, most assumed Kennedy would be headlining WrestleMania. Oh, what could have been. Number 2, Vladimir Kozlov. This was so weird. It was 2008. For some reason, WWE thought it was 1987. I'm just not sure fans en masse wanted to see angry foreign heel, especially as it felt so cliched. Kozlov was also thrust into the spot with no real push. It was almost like Vince McMahon was searching for new ideas. He panicked and picked an old one instead. Vladimir got all the help too, as he even defeated The Undertaker on SmackDown, and that never happened. He also had a proper war with Triple H over the world title, but again, that lacked heat as the crowd didn't really care. WWE soon gave up on this, with Vlad being moved into a comedy gimmick with Santino Marella, and hey, it was quite funny. It was also a huge 180 shift. With hindsight, I think WWE saw Kozlov as an Ivan Drago figure, but again, we were long past that. Rocky IV was released in 1985, so we were 23 years too late. Number 1, Gable Steveson. I mean, we likely shouldn't have called him the next Kurt Angle. That bar is way too high. Gable Steveson did arrive in WWE as a wrestling Olympic gold medalist, and look, in that field he was amazing. Many called him one of the best of all time. It's why WWE and UFC wanted to sign him up, and why when WWE got him he was put in NXT, but on a mega deal. They wanted to make this work. It didn't. There is no real reason either. If you want to bring Angle back into the mix, he wasn't the greatest rookie ever just because of what he could do inside the ring. Kurt figured out character and sports entertainment within what felt like a week. That's why he rose so quickly. It never seemed like Gable had the same light bulb moment, plus his work didn't have the same personality as Angle's. Again, we should not have made this comparison. Before he even made it to the main roster, he was let go, and the word was Steveson just didn't get it. Which is fine, I understand. pro wrestling isn't for everyone, but that's the whole point.
From rather foolish publicity stunts to just rubbing up top stars the wrong way. These are those exact moments wrestlers wreck their own careers in this business. So I'm Gareth from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are those wrestlers who destroyed their careers in a single moment. Bronson Matthews. Imagine it's your first day in an administrative role for a finance company, if you will. Somebody higher up than you has obstructed a doorway that you want to walk through, just chatting away to one of your colleagues. They didn't mean to get in your way, but you right now are annoyed. So annoyed, in fact, that you send out a company-wide email expressing exactly how irritated you are. You have annihilated your reputation, and because you're pretty much the most expendable person in the company at that moment in time, you're probably going to get fired. Now, this isn't a real scenario because nobody would ever be that stupid, would they? Except in wrestling, where this essentially happened. Bronson Matthews won the 6th season of WWE Tough Enough, which was hardly going to kickstart his career and send him straight into the main event. But still, neither was burying the social outcasts as jobbers on Twitter. This apparently pissed off the likes of Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes and a few other people, and it got to the point where Matthews was eventually barred from the locker room because, well, yeah, that's kind of what you get. Yes, he did say that he was just tweeting in character, but still, just keep your fingers away from the Twitter machine. It's never a good idea, as you will see later on. Now, the 2016 incident didn't directly lead to his release, but it happened like a year before it, and his career was pretty much done as soon as he did that. Jackson Riker. Jackson Riker was nothing if not aggressively generic. A vacuum with a great physique. Sounds kind of familiar. But nobody has ever left a single one of his matches with the memory, really, just nothing. You remember that time he feuded with Elias? Yeah, probably not, but let me just catch you up on it. At that time, he played a babyface with apparent wartime PTSD, which was a pretty bleak development, and nobody really gave a damn about it. Nobody gave a damn because it was staggeringly mediocre, and because Riker's career was pretty much a zombified thing by 2021. He was doomed by his own doing to shamble through WWE because he was stupid and just ugly enough to put over Donald Trump amid protests over George Floyd's death in 2020. He knew exactly what he was doing, and so did the locker room that very much let him have it at the time, including Kevin Owens, who was disgusted that Riker even dared to try and get his catchphrase over at this moment in time. Forgotten no more has taken on a razor-sharp note of irony since Riker has only wrestled 5 times since leaving WWE. Jessica Havoc. Like I said before, don't tweet. There is no point, absolutely none. Or let's just be a bit more accurate, don't be a piece of crap. Jessica Havoc ruined her chances of ever making it in WWE when midway through a tryout that she felt was going kind of pretty well, people excavated old tweets of hers. And this was all according to a blog post. They ranged from spectacularly ill-advised to abhorrent in nature. While trying to get noticed on the independents, she absolutely buried WWE's Divas division, which, while fair, was again pretty stupid. Far more stupid and, well, awful was her decision to tweet out what she claims were ironic, racist jokes between friends. The "it was banter" excuse didn't really convince many people, and Havoc was consigned to virtual Impact Wrestling obscurity forevermore. Enzo Amore. Now, it was pretty unlikely that Enzo Amore was ever going to make his way back to WWE after he was released in 2018. He was fired after failing to inform WWE about a sexual assault allegation against him, and then he went and pursued a hip-hop career, as you do. Enzo wasn't a great wrestler, but that was never really his appeal, was it? He was a promo guy, and he was very good at it. But he was loathed by many of his peers because he was apparently quite an obnoxious guy who was absolutely in love with himself. Now, it was unlikely that he was ever going to go back to WWE after all of that, but it then became impossible after that strange publicity stunt that he pulled at Survivor Series 2018. Wearing Bart Simpson's Shelbyville wig and actually making it work, Enzo cut his signature promo before being forcibly ejected from the arena. Now, I've got a quick question for you. Was this the most awkward moment in wrestling history? I mean, it probably wasn't, but I want to know what you think is in the comment section down below. Tessa Blanchard. At her best and most motivated, Tessa Blanchard was outstanding before the likes of Rhea Ripley started lapping her. Incredibly physical, her power game was super legitimate, and she registered everything she did brilliantly. She exuded presence and was drenched in confidence. She also had the reputation. The reputation of being a complete and utter arrogant pain in the ass that nobody really liked. And this all allegedly cost her a job in WWE. With WWE, according to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, believing that she had a bit of a bad attitude when she attended a tryout many years ago. Simply put, wherever Tessa went, trouble usually followed. But she was consistently successful in Impact Wrestling, it's worth saying. On the eve of her big moment though, when she was set to dethrone Sami Callihan for the World Damn Championship, Chelsea Green and Allysin Kay, amongst others, accused Tessa variously of belittling her peers, and even spitting in a black performer's face and calling her a pretty vile racist slur. A series of callous behaviours cost Tessa her career, but the backlash came after one specific burst. Alex Riley. Alex Riley really
had something, and in an alternate universe, he probably would have used it. Athletic and cocky, he learned the basic cookie-cutter WWE style rather quickly, and his achievement on Season 2 of NXT can be described as, with no hyperbole, towering. Everybody else on that show looked like a complete and utter geek when Matt Striker just asked them to talk about some random topics into the mic. Riley took it in his stride, baby. And then apparently he ran straight into John Cena, which, you know, can happen because the guy is invisible. Now, Riley may not be the most reliable of narrators, it's gotta be said, but former WWE wrestler Gabby Tuff claims that Cena tried to get Riley fired after Riley just refused to follow some of Cena's advice. Riley didn't do what was asked of him in a 6-person tag apparently, and from that moment on, this guy's name was Mud. Now again, it's worth saying that Tuff herself may have some motive to sully John Cena's name. Cena apparently told her to stop using the burning hammer after a botched attempt to do that move looked a bit too similar to the AA. But Riley's demotion was sudden even for the stop-start era of WWE booking. Dave Schultz. Dave Schultz had a nasty, intimidating aura, knew his way around a threat, and could go to the required standard. Not that that was of tremendous importance at the time though. Physiques and personality mattered more, and Schultz, a dark alley nightmare, had them both. As often happens, his flashpoint moment has now led to many romanticizing his career in hindsight. But he wasn't the heel Magnum TA, and had to work in Japan for a while afterwards, but the narrative that he was blackballed was not entirely a shoot. The WWF felt they simply could not use him. He resurfaced in Memphis and Stampede, but other promoters who weren't exactly going to respect the wishes of Vince McMahon in the 1980s still wanted nothing to do with him. A separate incident with Mr. T, whom Schultz saw as an outsider, was what ultimately led to his departure. Hulk Hogan may have embellished or changed his story in subsequent years, but more than one eyewitness believed Schultz to have posed a threat to T, and he was seen as a liability. His career was destroyed of his own doing ultimately. Austin Aries. Austin Aries was one of the best performers on the planet. In 2012, his matches flowed with the craftsmanship of some of the best ever. Everything he did he just nailed, and in general he was every bit as good as he felt he was. And the greatest man who ever lived shtick was no gimmick, ladies and gentlemen. The man's opinion of himself was higher than he was. Now that's not saying much, but you get what I mean. Aries was also infamous for rubbing people up the wrong way. Aries, who was often quite a nasty piece of work, managed to secure work time and time again because he was that damn gifted, sadly. People forget that now because he turned into something worse than a heel with his nonsense misinformation stuff in the pandemic, but he was genuinely fantastic for a time. He doesn't get any work, and he hasn't for years now. It is out of the question though, because he completely no-sold Johnny Impact at Bound for Glory 2018, and then just simply upped and left after the finish of the main event. If he and Johnny were in cahoots, apparently, Impact and them certainly were not. He claims it was a work, brother, but what money did it draw, and what the hell was the whole point of it? This marked the last occasion in which Aries worked for a promotion of any real renown, because in this moment, he proved himself to be a massive self-serving liability. And Ivelisse. Branded with the euphemistic difficult to work with tag early on in her career, AEW founder Tony Khan nonetheless took the risk. His women's division, already painfully thin, was decimated by the pandemic. The early idea to import experienced and exciting Joshi talent was rendered impossible due to travel issues, leaving a green crop of performers who were struggling to transition to national television wrestling. This wasn't their fault, they'd just come up in a women's independent wrestling scene that barely functioned as a feeder system. Tony Khan might be guilty of perpetuating the bleak cycle of women's wrestling in the US, but it's always existed, and all this gave Ivelisse a way in. Firstly, she could go, and without being blow away awesome, she could still work a snug and convincing style, and she had the experience to work TV-length matches without getting entirely lost. She was paired with Thunder Rosa on the 10th of September 2020 Dynamite, which was otherwise a bit of an all-timer. After more than a few stiff shots thrown in either direction, Ivelisse sat in a Thunder Rosa submission like a toddler that had just been told they have to give their dummy to Santa this year. Now, while it should be noted that the two did work together in a tag team match a couple of weeks later with no issue, in various media interviews after being dropped, Ivelisse alleged systemic mistreatment from the coaching staff. Blaming everybody but herself, once more, it's exceedingly unlikely that she'll work in the mainstream ever again.
Two performers could have worked their damn asses off to sell folks on the genuine hatred shared between the pair, or a wonderfully detailed story could have been patiently executed over months or even years. But all of that effort and excitement can quickly evaporate if certain mistakes are not avoided. So I am Gareth, this is WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 costly mistakes that doomed great wrestling feuds. Number 10, The Miz versus Daniel Bryan. Not allowing the bitter enemies to really embrace the blood feud. feud. After an absolutely riveting exchange between the polar opposites on Talking Smack in 2016, folks were champing at the bit to see an unretired American dragon beat the hell out of a certain A-lister. However, when they were finally treated to exactly that in the summer of 2018, it's safe to say the entire thing just didn't live up to the hype generated by that earlier talk show explosion between The Miz and Debray. Things never really sparked into life for the two. WWE seemingly never saw what could have been a hugely personal war between a guy who once branded the other a coward for not making the comeback he'd promised fans, and the underdog who refused to play things safe as anything other than a throwaway feud to keep both blokes busy for a few months. And after years of build-up and anticipation, the hugely underwhelming program went out with a whimper as Bryan stole a roll-up win in Australia. Number 9, MJF versus Adam Cole. Too much Kingdom slow motion nonsense. In all honesty, you could probably say it was Adam Cole's dodgy landing on the night of Grand Slam 2023 that really ruined this once magical program between bestest pals. But AEW certainly didn't help themselves by choosing to keep the Bay man busy in the most unfunny and unimaginative way possible in the weeks that followed his ankle being battered. Repeatedly helping out his pal Roderick Strong and hanging out with the Kingdom, the foursome passed the time by taking part in hilarious shenanigans like scooting around a house and spreading peanut butter in slow motion. The whole thing just felt like a lazy attempt to replicate the vibes captured in Cole and Maxwell's many joyous adventures and exchanges outside of the squared circle, and ultimately only really succeeded in turning folks off the tale being told about the best pals, Cole's whiny neck-strong mate, and the devil in the room. Number 8, Becky Lynch versus Trish Stratus, taking too damn long. While the concept of a heel Trish Stratus irritating the Irish badass for a few months seemed rather strong on paper, in reality choosing to kick off the feud not long after Mania 39 with the intention of the entire thing reaching its climax at SummerSlam was probably a little too ambitious. Stratus noticeably getting the hump in the wake of then Women's Tag Team Champions Lita and Becky Lynch stealing all the spotlight heading into the show of shows, and the Legend's decision to stab both of her former teammates in the back as she cost them their belts, got things off to a fairly strong start too. Once they'd gotten their first fight out of the way at Night of Champions though, fans began to lose interest in the increasingly dull promo battles between the two as SummerSlam appeared to be moving further away each and every week. WWE then opted to keep the never-ending feud off the Super Show altogether, though that at least lit a fire in both ladies' bellies that resulted in a fantastic steel cage showdown at Payback. And with that in mind, I want to know what you think your most disappointing feud of 2023 has been. You let me know in the comment section down below. Number 7, CM Punk versus WWE, adding Kevin Nash. WWE hadn't felt as hot as it did in 2011 for a decade, and that was all thanks to a little rebellious punker getting everyone's attention with one particularly mesmerizing pipe bomb. The early days of CM Punk's fight against not just the face that runs the place, John Cena, but WWE management was utterly gripping to behold. And then things all got a little muddled in the wake of the then WWE Champion's return to sports entertainment, not long after blowing a kiss to Vince McMahon in Chicago. After just about managing to keep hold of his belt at SummerSlam, the bizarre arrival of Kevin Nash ultimately resulted in the best in the world dropping the strap to Mr. Money in the Bank Alberto Del Rio, as Punk's once exciting war against the establishment ended up getting bogged down by peculiar text message twists, Nash not being cleared to compete, and Triple H's desire to beat this effer, according to Big Kev himself. Put simply, this program started to become infinitely less cool after this Big Daddy arrived on the scene. Number 6, Wardlow versus MJF. Contract issues lead to Maxwell no-showing a fan event. An increasingly popular babyface Mr. Mayhem looked poised to break out as AEW's next potential main event star in 2022. However, trouble behind the scenes soon completely overshadowed what should have been a perfect end to this otherwise masterfully told story. With Maxwell and Tony Khan reportedly clashing over the former's contract situation, the Salt of the Earth felt he was worth more than he was currently on. The eventual AEW World Champion decided to no-show a fan signing event on Double or Nothing weekend. And though MJF would end up still doing the JOB for the big lad at the pay-per-view, fans were talking more about the villain's real-life antics than Wardlow on what should have been his night. Oh, and I just quickly want to say thank you today for watching this video right now, and if you like what you see, then go and click on that subscribe button down below. Number 5, Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose. Dean becomes a germaphobe and references Roman's illness. Members of the Badass Shield faction clashing always has the potential to become something properly special, and this was precisely why folks were once so thrilled about the idea of a then Dean Ambrose finally deciding he'd had enough of his mates in 2018 and turning heel for the first time in an age. Having Dean Ambrose stabbed Seth Rollins in the back on not just the night they'd won tag gold, but the same evening fellow brother Roman Reigns announced he was once again fighting leukemia, was certainly a bold and shocking call. All of that intrigue and buzz was soon squandered in record time, however, after claiming that Roman would have to answer to the man upstairs for what he did as part of the unit, getting jabbed in the ass by a doctor before wearing a gas mask to avoid catching an illness from fans. What initially looked like an open goal for WWE became yet another disappointing miss. Number 4, Chris Jericho versus Kevin Owens, taking away the Universal Championship. This pair of wisecracking heels became Raw's MVPs, doing all they could to keep the horrendous strap on Owens' shoulder, and after a few teases of an inevitable implosion, things finally broke down after Chris Jericho chucked his pal into a title match with Goldberg at Fastlane, with that decision directly leading to an iconic Festival of Friendship breakup. Had WWE continued pushing the feud as the most important rivalry in the company, there's a solid chance KO and Jericho would have ended up main eventing WrestleMania. Instead though, Vince felt his incoming Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar Mania rematch needed the strap more, which it didn't. And this once super hot potential show of shows world title battle was ultimately downgraded to second on the card, as the two produced a forgettable contest over the US title. Number 3, Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley, not doing what was practiced. Viewers had been treated to yet another exhilarating All Elite Wrestling World Championship rivalry. The cleaner had stolen the top title away from the Mighty Mox at Winter is Coming. The modern greats had also put on a sickening lights out war at Full Gear 2019. And all of that chaos and bad blood led to one of the most intimidating and potentially explosive contests in company history. Or at least that latter half would have been true had one specific person bothered to stick to the previously rehearsed plan. The quote-unquote boss in charge of this explosion wasn't present for the rehearsal, and when they did show up for the actual show, their decision to try something different that would apparently make the moment look even better infamously backfired. In the end, both Kenny and the viewers watching on wished all involved had simply gone with what had been practiced beforehand. Number 2, Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt, getting too spooky. Randy Orton and the late Bray Wyatt rivalry heading into WrestleMania 33 was initially quite fascinating. A Team SmackDown victory at Survivor Series, SmackDown Tag Team Championship reign, and both a Royal Rumble and WWE Championship win for Orton and Wyatt respectively eventually followed. But then things all started to get a little odd when the apparent babyface burned down the Wyatt compound and challenged Bray to a bout at Mania, projecting various bugs on the canvas throughout a rather dull WWE title contest. The once gripping rivalry was already completely ruined before the company then doubled down on the ridiculous spookiness with a terrible House of Horrors match at Payback. Number 1, The Rock versus John Cena, forcing a sequel. While he was never going to win any Match of the Year contests, John Cena and The Rock spitting fire at one another in the lead up to their WrestleMania 28 blockbuster made for simply electric must-see television. The call to then try and squeeze out yet another show of shows epic between the two larger-than-life figures, however, quickly undermined a lot of the instantly iconic and rather surreal work that had been committed to screens the prior year. Fans had already seen the two brilliantly go in double-footed on one another heading into what was supposedly a once-in-a-lifetime event, but WWE clearly wanted to get as much dollar as humanly possible out of this Clash of the Titans. So CM Punk was forced to drop his WWE title, one of the most painfully predictable roads to WrestleMania of all time unfolded, and Cena inevitably lifted the belt to end an initially quite incredible feud on a rather low note.
Though the wrestlers that we're going to talk about on this list clearly thought they were about to debut a look that would leave jaws dangling, unleash a shot that would elicit an audible gasp, or throw out a WrestleMania entrance that would be instantly immortalized, well, the opposite ended up happening. This lot just looked like they were either trying too hard or hadn't fully considered just how silly their chosen gear, entrances, or words really were. So I am Gareth, you're watching WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 11 humiliating times wrestlers tried to look cool and turned into clowns. Also, a quick salute to the terrific post on R² Circle that inspired the list you're about to watch. Number 11, the Nightmare Family boldly go. An entrance remembered more today for the sight of poor Pharaoh being terrified by the pyro. That distressing visual largely pulled attention away from Cody Rhodes and the Nightmare Family's interesting attire of choice. The American Nightmare and Shawn Spears were involved in a pretty intense feud coming into All Out 2019, with the latter controversially cracking Rhodes over the head with a steel chair in the build-up, up. And that is what made the arrival of the AEW EVP and his allies in full Nightmare Trek gear feel a little, well, odd. In case it wasn't clear, Cody is a big lover of Star Trek. He even noted in 2023 that he'd love to play anyone in a Star Trek project. Now that's all fine, but it was still hard to shake the feeling of this being a little goofy for such a personal battle. Rhodes likely felt like the coolest man alive as he strutted out alongside the rest of his crew here. However, this Star Trek tribute undermined the intensity of the whole scenario, and just felt like the sort of entrance you'd throw out on a Halloween special. Number 10, Edge grows wings for the show of shows. WrestleMania is the night for bold entrance swings, folks. However, as this list will show, sometimes said attempts to hit a home run turn into rather embarrassing misses. For every spectacular Shawn Michaels zipline and awesome live music performance, there have been things like whatever the hell the Rated R Superstar attempted at WrestleMania 39, before his Hell in a Cell match with Finn Balor. During his last run in WWE, Edge began tipping his cap to the past, evidently hoping that folks of a certain age would get a kick out of him going full Brood again after so many years. And on a number of occasions, this led to the former world champion unleashing a fiery arrival within a stadium. Now, his SummerSlam 2021 return to Brood life was actually well handled, with Edge rising from the flames in his trench coat wearing his trusty shades. But that successful blast from the past unfortunately set the stage for him to turn things up a notch at the show of shows, growing a set of dumb gigantic wings and donning a shiny helmet mask thing that made him look like an extra in another deeply uncool Mania entrance that we will get to later. The whole thing just screamed, "Look how badass I am, guys, really, look at me," as Slayer blasted in the background. Perhaps it would have looked cooler had the sun been down. He just looked like an awkward metallic bird in broad daylight. Thankfully, on both of the aforementioned occasions, the Brood prelude was ultimately followed by good old Rated R Metalingus, acting as a nice double whammy at the biggest party of the summer, but a coolness life raft on the grandest stage of them all. I was so glad to hear it. Alright, speaking of WrestleMania entrances, I want to know right now, what do you think is the greatest WrestleMania entrance of all time? It's probably not going to be the Edge one from WrestleMania 39, but let me know what is in the comments below. Number 9, Nikos Rikos outfit fail in NXT. It is important to do whatever you can to stand out from the rest of the pack in the competitive world of professional wrestling. Some do this by sporting a peculiar haircut, others show off a ridiculous finishing move. And then there are those that opt to boast unique in-ring gear that forces you to sit up and take notice. Unique is certainly one word you could use to describe Nikos Rikos' wrestling outfit. Another would be hideous. With a Greek flag slapped on his stomach, the lad from New Jersey strutted into NXT back in 2019, with quite possibly the worst looking gear in developmental history, perhaps even wrestling history. Going full Zack Ryder with the one-legged tight, Rikos then chose to ill-advisedly combine that with a left arm/torso sleeve. The shiny black getup is definitely unlike any attire you've ever likely seen before, but there's a reason for that. No one else on planet Earth would possibly think that going half gold dust was a strong, captivating look. Rikos did though, and that was precisely why he proudly walked into his Keith Lee match looking like the cat who got the cream, and a clown. Number 8, CM Punk fires shots at AEW to silence. A slightly different kind of entry next, one focusing more on words than clothing or entrances. The best in the world has not exactly wasted any opportunity to fire a shot at his old workplace in the time since his messy AEW departure in 2023. In CM Punk's mind, throwing cheeky digs at Tony Khan's company in his WWE promos is the sort of edgy work that has helped make him one of the coolest and most popular performers of all time. However, in reality, they've not really landed in the way he'd have hoped. Judging from the lack of any real reaction to comments alluding to his backstage scraps in AEW or that promotion's crowd size, it seems like the average WWE fan doesn't really know about all this drama or care enough to react to the petty slights. And those who are aware of what Punk's trying to achieve with them have just been left wincing at an iconic worker swinging and missing with failed zingers. The Punker needs to really stick to blasting Hulkamania and generally keep keeping the focus on the stories being told inside of WWE's walls. Anything else is just wasted energy at this point, and does more damage to him than the company he's attacking. Number 7. John Cena wears jorts in his Mafia. Oh yeah, speaking of CM Punk, the best in the world was actually present in the following unintentionally silly entrance. Back at WrestleMania 22, the punker was one of the extras seen hanging from the side of a car, with said blokes playing John Cena's fellow Mafia or Chain Gang members. You could see what WWE and Cena were going for here, and those initial moments actually worked quite well as everyone involved looked the part, wandering around in their slick suits and holding their Tommy guns. Then, the face that runs the place walked out. He had the fedora, he had the coat, he had the weapon. What he didn't have, however, was the aforementioned three-piece. Instead, Cena just stood there looking like a kid who'd found his papa's jacket and decided to play dress-up. If Big Match John really didn't feel like going for the tear-off suit option, then surely just throwing on the hat and shooting off a few rounds would have sufficed. Opting for the jorts jacket combo did him no favors here, and it was almost as embarrassing as the chorus of boos that met the supposed babyface hero that night in Chicago. If you're having fun with this silly little video today, then tap that subscribe button down below for more of this fun WhatCulture wrestling stuff. Number 6. Triple H terminates his aura. The guy stood opposite John Cena that night in Chicago was none other than Triple H, a person who also doesn't have the best track record when it comes to throwing out what he thinks is a cool moment. You can't just pretend that the game has never got it right with the big special entrance, because sometimes he does okay. WrestleMania 21's Motorhead live performance was an all-timer arrival. His glass smash at Mania 25 was the best thing about that Randy Orton flop. But there have been a few stinkers in there too. Perhaps the most hilariously stupid of the lot came at the 31st show of shows. This being the same year that Terminator Genisys released, WWE promoted that film via the King of Kings entrance for his showdown with Sting. This wasn't just a case of showing a quick trailer and having Tripp sledgehammer a few T-800s though. Nope, the cerebral assassin became part king, part silver machine that night. And it looked just as goofy as it sounds. Not even the presence of the legendary Arnold Schwarzenegger in a short mid-entrance clip could save this deeply uncool sequence. All of it, from the awkward way he was raised up high on a platform alongside some robots, to the stupid monocle mask of doom he no doubt fully approved of, terminated Papa H's aura before the bell had even rung. Number 5. Cody Rhodes' giant skull session. While on the subject of absurd skull mitts on the grandest stage, Cody Rhodes took a page out of his favorite wrestler's book at WrestleMania XL or 40. Say it how you want. This was easily the biggest night of the American Nightmare's career. The moment he'd finally reached the top of the mountain and finished that damn story. He didn't exactly get off to the strongest of starts though, as Rhodes rose up through the Codyvator to reveal a shiny new addition to his Nightmare entrance, bringing the American Nightmare tattoo stamped on his neck to life. The brilliant Jason Baker, who designed the Fiend's menacing face, crafted something that would likely look stunning in a glass case. Sat on top of the soon-to-be WWE Champion's head though? Nah, not so much. The proportions were just a little bit off. The giant winged skull making Cody look like a real-life Funko Pop figure. Now everything else about Rhodes' arrival that night in Philly was near perfect. The fire and nightmare flags, his beloved Brandy by his side, and Kingdom blaring out around a packed stadium. It's just a shame that the entrance then had a decent amount of cool point shaved off due to this weird bobblehead look. Number 4. Shane McMahon so many times. There was definitely a point in time there when Shane McMahon could actually be classed as a relatively cool dude. As the young son of the boss in his earlier years in WWE, he threw himself into some absolutely insane scenarios, falling off very tall things and being thrown through actual glass by Olympians, building a reputation as quite the daredevil who could be relied upon to create many a jaw-dropping moment. There was even something a little bit awesome about seeing him return to take on The Undertaker at WrestleMania 32 and dive off of Hell in a Cell. For much of his time in WWE post-Mania 32 though, the C word was the last thing that sprung to mind when talking about Shano. Well, not that one anyway. No matter how hard he tried, whether he was throwing his shoot punches that looked terrible but still hurt more than your average worked shot, trying to make his edgy Raw Underground a thing, or attempting to prove he could still go with the best of them, or The Miz at least. Shane made unintentionally looking like an egomaniacal clown his specialty, and if his surprise WrestleMania 39 return and subsequent embarrassing mishap are his final ever moments on a WWE show, at least they were memorable, eh? Number 3, Jon Moxley and his Death Riders go from terrifying badasses to goofy villains. Make no mistake, on his day, Jon Moxley can be one of the most badass, effortlessly cool humans walking planet Earth, as a heel or a face. Very few of those days have occurred over the last few months, however, at time of recording anyway. Now his time as the leader of the Death Riders got off to a promising / horrifying start, attempting to murder Bryan Danielson and taking the AEW World Championship hostage. So far, so genuinely quite cold and terrifying. However, as the months have agonizingly passed by, the Death Riders' mission to save AEW has become increasingly embarrassing and difficult to watch. There's been a number of moments when the unit have felt more like dumb cartoon antagonists that leave your eyes rolling rather than intimidating thugs you can't take your eyes off. But Mox & Co. tying up the Rock and Roll Express in one of the silliest segments of the year on Collision, yeah, that was probably the Ard group's lowlight up to this point. It may have gotten worse by the time I've recorded this, I don't know. They may have thought they looked like unstoppable menaces here, but in truth they resembled childish teens playing a prank on their elders. It was not a good look. And each new rambling Moxley promo, unimaginative beatdown, and ridiculous backstage attack is making the group and the entire storyline harder and harder to take seriously. When your fans are praying for the reset button to be hit every single week, whatever you're doing simply is not working, Tony. Number 2, Adam Cole's Master Chief. Wrestlers saluting their favorite video games and characters during their entrances has become pretty commonplace, hasn't it? Some of these tributes look undeniably awesome, like New Day's colorful Gears of War costumes, Kenny Omega's epic Final Fantasy gear, and Jade Cargill's Mortal Kombat look. Others, though, not so much. Sadly, Adam Cole's dream of finally becoming the Master Chief falls into that latter category. The former NXT champion is a gigantic fan of the Halo series, and has been since he was a kid. Hell, his wrestling team even ran out to the game's iconic theme. Yeah, I bet that was pretty cool. So, Cole likely felt like he could take down an entire army of aliens all by himself when he showed off his Master Chief-inspired look at AEW Revolution 2022. His face told the story of a lad living out a childhood dream, that's for sure. However, the clunky gear itself, which consisted of only a chest plate and arm protection, just didn't look all that great, did it? Instead of making folks think of the badass Spartan he was paying tribute to, images of Buzz Lightyear likely sprang to mind. Now, obviously, cosplaying as a massive, super cool soldier known for wearing chunky green armor is always going to be a tough thing to pull off. But yeah, this wasn't it. While Cole probably loved every single minute he spent looking like he'd forgotten his Spartan trousers for his big AEW World Championship match against Hangman Adam Page, those watching on were left wincing at the gear equivalent of he didn't quite get all of it. The Halo-inspired trunks and knee pads, however, not bad at all. Number 1, Triple H welcomes you to the Netflix era. That man again. Whether you're a fan of the guy or not, there's no getting away from the fact that Paul Levesque has had a huge part to play in the unbelievable success WWE are currently experiencing. He's evidently helped create a more positive environment backstage, and given his audience precisely what they want more often than not. Every now and then, though, Papa H just can't help himself. It doesn't matter that he's no longer able to throw down in between the ropes. The former world champion still finds a way to squeeze himself into the spotlight, doesn't he? And earn a few cheap pops in the process. Take WWE's huge Netflix debut earlier this year. After once again voicing another promo package patting himself and the company on the back, Trips appeared in the middle of the Monday Night Raw ring and began delivering a speech he undoubtedly felt was as epic as the stage he was standing on. It wasn't. It was actually hilarious for all the wrong reasons. Trips took the time to tell the 17,000 in attendance to show the globe who they were, while they were completely blacked out and the spotlight was firmly on him. Awkward. That will sadly be the last ever monotonous, accidentally comical rah-rah speech we hear from the game too, as he was suddenly blown up in an extravagant pyro explosion shortly after.
Aura, that is the new word. We've also got cinema and live show charisma. Wrestling is not a real place. We are focusing on the first today, though, because in many ways it's more important than in-ring psychology. Fans love it. Given how rambunctious the industry can be, however, you're only one angle away from being told you are now or less, which isn't a thing, but hey, we gotta talk about something today, so I am Simon Miller, and let's go through 8 very specific examples. Number 8, Austin Aries. It is important to know that Austin Aries at one time was ahead of the curve. He was a must-see in many a promotion, and could move from a wrist lock to a 450 no problem. He was a talented guy. Aries was also the TNA champion and nobody blinked an eye, and even when he was dueling with Neville in the cruiserweight division, I mean, they weren't given the platform, but the feud was really good. Some of the matches were top draw. For some reason, though, in 2018, Austin got annoyed about something, I suppose, and went into, to use the classic term, business for himself. It was TNA's Bound for Glory show, and Aries was going to lose his championship to Johnny Impact thanks to Starship Pain. I mean, it was totally okay. At the time, a title change felt perfectly acceptable. Johnny got the 1, 2, 3, and the crowd reacted, so yeah, we were having a good old time when we weren't. For some reason, Aries instantly got back to his feet as if nothing had happened. He left the ring, and then he flipped off TNA executive Don Callis. What? Now, of course, some people have claimed this was a work that went awry, whereas others are just like, nope, Aries threw a tantrum, I guess. Only those involved know, but you gotta look at it from both sides. If this was story-based, why did anybody agree? After WCW pulled this nonsense in 2000, we all knew how stupid it was. Don't do it again. And if this was Aries deciding to ignore the art of wrestling, well, it caused a right stinking yeah. Sort of stole away all the good work he had done. That's not what you want. Everybody just wanted to talk about this. Number 7, Seth Rollins. I think this one is slightly unfair. When WWE was going through a rough time in 2019, they were blessed to have Seth Rollins. Aside from his work in the ring, Rollins defended the company to a fault. The WWE needed that. Some of the booking was awful. The tweet that set the internet wrestling community off was after the Battleground pay-per-view, and yeah, you don't remember that show. That's not your fault because I'd mentioned it was such an odd time for WWE. Nothing felt like it mattered long term. Seth decided he would defend the cruiserweight match between Drew Gulak, Tony Nese, and Tozawa after online criticism, but that's not really what people were mad with. Again, it was just this constant lack of consistency. For example, elsewhere on this card, we also got Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus The New Day, and just as the former was starting to cook, they were broken up because of course they were, whereas Ricochet versus Samoa Joe had given it their all for their United States Championship bout, but that belt just didn't matter. It was horrible to see. It'd been reduced to a trinket. Rollins himself faced Baron Corbin, and again, the match was fine, but WWE were not being fair to Corbin here at all, so when Seth came out the other end so forceful, well, there was always going to be a backlash. Not for pay-per-view, it just wasn't a fun period. Of course, it's hit the ceiling when we got to that Hell in a Cell match with Bray Wyatt, but I do feel like Rollins was just trying to fly the flag. He was the guy and likely felt as if he was trying as hard as he could. I truly do understand this, but yeah, it wasn't the best move, and WWE overall, my gosh. Number 6, Ric Flair. This is going to happen with every wrestler if you go on too long. I can't begrudge it because who am I to tell someone when to retire? And also, no, I don't think it ruins somebody's legacy. It's like the Star Wars films. There are some stinkers, but that OG trilogy, you just can't touch it. It hit harder for Ric Flair just because, intentional or not, he did have the perfect retirement. The one more match and I'll go away forever stipulation in WWE from 2008 onwards wasn't the best booked, but when we got to the Shawn Michaels match at WrestleMania 24, well, it was excellent. We got the big Raw send-off too, and of course the Nature Boy had the itch again. I mean, he barely missed a year of action when he went on a Hulk Hogan Australian tour before going on a massive run in TNA. It was almost as if we'd made up him drawing a line on his career in our heads. Those Aussie shows didn't help either, as they did not light up the world. While he did have some good moments in TNA, fans don't forget, we're like elephants. We already knew he had given it up. His retirement match in 2022 also didn't help. Flair pretended to have a heart attack mid-match, and I mean, yeah, that is not the way to end a legendary career. Sometimes you do just have to walk away. Number 5, Sin Cara. Or maybe Mystico as you know him now. And if you need proof you can get your aura back, go and watch this guy in 2025. He's probably the most over person throughout Mexico. He is seen as a walking hero. Years prior to this, in 2011, Triple H saw the potential in the man too, and he made him his first big WWE signing. The presentation was mostly the same, but he did have a brand new name, Sin Cara. To give you a better idea of what they had landed, Mystico was helping CMLL sell out Arena Mexico all of the time, and that had a capacity of around about 16,500 fans. He was also voted the biggest box office draw in the Wrestling Observer Awards, and that was in 2006, and yes, at that time, John Cena was active. For whatever reason, this new character was doomed though, and that was from day dot. Sin Cara had a spectacular entrance where he was going to use a trampoline to bounce into the ring, but nope, it went wrong and he fell on his ass. Of course, anybody can get past that, but somebody must have had it in for this guy. All of his subsequent matches had some sort of error, and look, he's only human, but from a fan point of view, it was becoming a thing. This dude was meant to have come right out of a comic strip, and nobody was buying it. There were also rumors as well backstage that Mystico was acting too much like a star, even though he was a star. I mean, that's just wrestling politics for you. It really did fall from there until Mystico left the company, but as I've said, he did find his way again. That's a reminder, kids. You are never totally dead in the water. Number 4, Chris Jericho. I mean, you just can't get away from it. I do understand the internet chat is not the overall wrestling discussion. That doesn't mean we can dismiss it entirely. All walks of life have to be considered. The issue this group have decided on, though, is that the Chris Jericho vortex is a real thing, and anybody who gets trapped within it is doomed. I mean, that is quite damning. They point to the feud with Ricky Starks, which sort of triggered a heel turn when beforehand Ricky was becoming a mega babyface, and then there was the Adam Cole program. Well, even I can argue that one. For whatever reason, it just did not click. Hook didn't really benefit either, and who knows about Sammy Guevara? I don't really understand what's happening with him. It led to Please Retire chants, and I've already made my thoughts clear on that. You're a long time gone. You should wrestle as long as you think you're able to. It is true, though, that some of these did affect Jericho's overall aura from a select audience, hence why this conversation is continuing right now. I don't think it affects his overall run in the industry, which has been all time. And look, we're still getting gems in recent memory. That Bandito match was great. I suppose the contrast comes in the fact there was a time when Chris Jericho could do no wrong. He was the forever guy, but you know the deal. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Indeed. Number 3, Jeff Hardy. Here is another guy who has mad staying power. I mean, go and watch the Hardys return to NXT in 2025. People still love them. It comes after a lot of issues for Jeff Hardy, which have always held him back a little bit, and Jeff himself talked about this in an interview. If he had stuck to the straight and narrow path, his star level likely would have been 10 times what it was. And trust me, during his heyday, he was massive. 2011 was the first true low point, as Hardy was meant to be challenging Sting for the TNA title at Destination X. To this day, I've no idea who signed off on this, but Jeff was allowed to go to the ring even though he was clearly intoxicated. The man does not look well, and before the bell rings, then GM Eric Bischoff sorting us out for no reason and secretly relays the new plan for the bout. Sting is going to pin this guy instantly, even if by force. The referee counts to 3 no matter what. It was awful. Sting himself was livid, as he had every right to be, and the fans were pissed too. I mean, of course they were. If you'd spent your money to see Sting versus Jeff Hardy, you wanted to see it. That was an iconic match on paper. This came off a string of similar stories, and we know what happened in AEW. It was just bad, and it did take away from the entity that was Jeff Hardy. Thankfully, he seems to have things back on track today, and that is what really matters. That's why fans are back by his side. Because really, there ain't ever going to be anybody else like him. Number 2, Jon Moxley. Is this one fair? I think it may be a little bit of recency bias. Let's get stuck in. Absolutely, the character of Dean Ambrose was killed in WWE when he turned heel on Seth Rollins and started to breathe through a gas mask. Unless you've seen this, you do not get how bad it is. No wonder he was desperate to leave WWE soon afterwards. He totally reconnected with the audience when he did debut for AEW in 2019. And let's have it right, he was a huge reason for that company's rise. Not only was it a little bit like All Elite Wrestling's Lex Luger WCW moment, but him being there just helped. Moxley was awesome. This continued for ages too, until we got to this most recent Death Rider story. The intentions were right, as John's idea was to resell the idea of the AEW World title being the be-all and end-all, while simultaneously pushing as many of the young guys as possible. That's why at one point Darby Allin was rumoured to be the dude to beat him. He was as OG as they come. As we know, that didn't happen, and eventually the whole angle got weird and messy until nobody really knew what was happening. Mox took the brunt of this as it felt like it was his pitch, and sure, the goodwill he had was knocked a bit. That's wrestling for you. You're only as good as your last show. Kidnapping the Rock and Roll Express didn't help, as AEW fans felt this was way too WWE, and as of me talking, it is still going on. Although it does kind of feel like the company is getting ready to pivot. I will not take all of this and allow you to forget about what Mox did, though. You're allowed to have one swing and a miss. So while I personally don't really massively like the Death Rider story, it's still Jonathan Moxley, man. He is a very, very good wrestler. Number 1, Hulk Hogan. I mean, where do we even start? Of course, Hulk Hogan was one of the biggest wrestling stars ever, and without Hulkamania, who knows where the WWE would be? That is all true. That doesn't mean we can't make multiple statements, and as well as the above, Hulk is also a walking ball of controversy and seemingly not that good of a person. The first proper blow was the racism scandal that also featured Bubba the Love Sponge's wife, and some of the things Hogan said were abhorrent to say the least. What was even worse were the news reports that when getting ready to say sorry to the WWE locker room, he instead made it clear they're all celebrities, so be careful what you say and who can hear it. I mean, I wasn't there, but if that is true, that's not an apology. There's also so many other tales, all of which make you question the world, and it all led to the January 6th Raw debut on Netflix. For some reason, WWE decided to will Hogan out again, and yep, he was loudly booed. It's not really a surprise when you go through his recent history, and whatever Hulkamania once was, well, it's not now. Every 1980s heel who promised to kill this wave had finally succeeded, and all they had to do was let Hogan go Hogan. I can't imagine we'll see him again anytime soon, and it is all on his shoulders. None of this was good. I mean, it really wasn't. It was not good at all.
Many of the cliches about the wrestling industry being cyclical are true. But while the pendulum has unexpectedly swung WWE's way since Vince McMahon resigned in disgrace twice, AEW has undermined its own success by mastering the art of the cell phone. From the very beginning, AEW has gone all in, folks. Unfortunately, that meant the same flair, save for all-time great moments, has been afforded to some total stinkers too. So I am Gareth, you're watching WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 times AEW buried itself. Number 10, Discourse takes a dive. The 2020 public fallout between Jim Ross and Brandon Cutler highlighted generational tensions in wrestling philosophy in general, but underscored AEW's ongoing challenges with public relations even during a creative zenith. Ross, still AEW's lead commentator at the time, criticized the overuse of dives in modern wrestling on his podcast, noting that all you guys go outside, you cluster up like coils, you stand there in a huddle, friends and foes together side by side so you can catch some leaping idiot going over the top. Who never wins with this move? Jim wasn't a fan, clearly. His advocating for a more measured approach seemed short on a measured appraisal, and definitely struck a nerve with Cutler, who fired back on Twitter using Ross words against him in promotion of a multi-man match he was involved in, posting that this Wednesday on AEW Dynamite 7 vs 7. We're gonna go outside, cluster up like coils, stand there in a huddle, friends and foes together side by side to catch some leaping idiot going over the top. Now, where have I heard that before? The exchange divided fans and talent, and undermined AEW's vitally important image of locker room unity and mutual respect. Instead of fostering dialogue, it revealed glimmers of internal discord, slightly betraying a brand that felt otherwise invincible. Number 9, Tony Khan's questionable victory lap. In the aftermath of October 2023's one-off Tuesday night war between NXT and AEW Dynamite, an infamous Tony Khan tweet about John Cena and The Undertaker drew reactions almost far more intense than the novelty ratings battle itself. NXT, bolstered by a ludicrous slate of some of WWE's biggest stars, outdrew AEW Dynamite in total viewers, boasting 921,000 to Dynamite's 609,000. In the face of some of the usual responses to such a result, Khan seized upon a historic statistic. This was the first time the likes of John Cena and The Undertaker had appeared on a mainstream show to less than 1 million viewers. Broadly, he framed it as a moral victory for Dynamite. It was a quintessential Tony Khan move in how it kept receipts but revealed them chaotically. AEW had, after all, held its ground in the all-important 18-49 demo, drawing .26 to NXT's .30. 0. It didn't do badly at all. Well, this wasn't about the numbers, no, it was about the narrative. For many, it was something of a bleak grasp for a second win when the first would have sufficed. For Khan, the fact that WWE needed such names to fend off Dynamite's cameo on Tuesdays reinforced AEW's ailing position as a disruptor. While we're talking about NXT and AEW clashing, I want to know right now, what is your favorite moment from the AEW NXT Wednesday Night Wars? Let me know in the comments down below, baby. Number 8, not good booking. Rather fittingly, considering a golden era for All Elite Wrestling was starting to fade. It was during a Daily's Place New Year's Dash edition of Dynamite that an infamous promo exchange made end-of-year award consideration, even though both performers had left the company long before December. And out of nowhere, rivalry between Dan Lambert and Brandy Rhodes existed to set up lower mid-card tag team action with the Men of the Year and the Nightmare Family. But the uncomfortable tone and questionable execution of the fiery exchange ensured that only the talkers got any of the attention. Lambert was venomous as ever to Rhodes, calling her an ex-stripper and mocking her age. Brandy interrupted, calling Lambert a less talented version of Paul Heyman, and he offered her out for a fight there and then, leaning on his BJJ status. What a man. A mic drop followed, retorting with, "Oh, so you're a black belt? Well, I'm a black bitch. Let's go." The bizarre scene was immediately and brutally punctuated by the arrival of Dustin Rhodes to be the one to take a shot from behind by the heels, and by commentator Jim Ross. Blithely brushing it off, he remarked that this was not good booking, as the segment floundered and flailed to a nondescript conclusion. Hard to argue with him, good old JR strikes again. Number 7, nobody cares. The November 14th, 2024 edition of AEW Dynamite delivered a moment that would have once scanned as car crash TV for the challenger brand. But rather than reflecting badly on the promotion, it simply just served to bury the two people directly involved. Following a singles clash between Serena Deeb and Dr. Britt Baker DMD on the October 2nd edition of the show, won by Baker, Deeb emerged on the ramp a few weeks later following Baker's victory over Penelope Ford. Presumably, she was there to illustrate that she had unfinished business, and maybe even call for a rematch. Before she had a chance though, Baker as good as put a bullet in the story there and then. On camera and on microphone, she repeatedly and loudly said, "Nobody cares," gesturing to the quiet crowd. She referred to her as irrelevant before again drawing attention to the disinterested audience. The ordinarily composed Deeb looked momentarily flustered here, recovering only to deliver an uninspired retort that fell on deaf ears. It was all a bit awkward. What made the moment worse was the glaring lack of follow-up. Commentary barely acknowledged the exchange, with even experienced hands Tony Schiavone and Excalibur sounding like they didn't know whether to sell it as a transgressive slice of worked frustration or an ill-advised shoot. Instead of building heat for their feud, Baker's jab undermined Deeb entirely. And per this recording a month later, there's not been much verbal or physical follow-up. There's been a little bit of this in Baker's past too. Number 6, sandbagging the champion. Until an extremely promising and at times exhilarating 2024 in the AEW Women's Division, Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa from the 2021 St. Patrick's Day Slam edition of Dynamite was the ceiling for the league. The hatred between the two simmered throughout the bloody war, elevating what was already a strong plunder match into something altogether more transcendent. As it turned out, there was more than a little fuel to the fire, and it re-emerged during an extremely questionable backstage promo a year later. Rosa had beaten Baker for the title in a good steel cage match 1 year on from their classic encounter, but had since experienced mixed fortunes as champion. In particular, there was some unflattering gossip about Rosa's supposed sandbagging of opponents, resulting in Baker dropping in on a July 14th backstage promo with Rosa and Toni Storm to hand out literal sandbags to the babyfaces. Oh boy. Already under scrutiny for inconsistent booking and a lack of comparable representation, the AEW Women's Division could not afford its top stars fueling public discord. As with the 2024 Serena Deeb jab, instead of fostering interest in a heated rivalry, the promo just undercut both talents. It shifted attention to whatever real-life beef there might have been, and the perceived bad attitude of Baker in particular. It was not a good look. If you right there are finding this list to be quite interesting, then tap that subscribe button and guess what? There is more where this came from. Number 5, is he sick? As the most experienced broadcaster during AEW's earliest days, Jim Ross's confusion and dismissal of Kenny Omega's Undertale costume during the Halloween 2019 edition of Dynamite showcased a notable disconnect at the commentary table, and indeed between significant figures within the company. Omega is and always has been known for embracing niche pop culture references. It makes him happy and he always looks rather cool, doesn't he? And here he chose to address as Sans from the aforementioned game. It was a nod appreciated by younger fans and gaming enthusiasts alike, and explained in detail by Excalibur as Omega entered, and in such a way that tethered the outfit to the storyline dip in form the Bespart machine was experiencing. But Ross's open bewilderment and indifference and arguable disdain, even after Excalibur's notes, created an awkward moment on commentary. It extended beyond that though. Ross's reaction inadvertently highlighted a generational gap within AEW's presentation, and gave bad faith actors an excuse to exploit a divide. While Excalibur worked to contextualize Omega's choice for fans unfamiliar with the game, Ross's "is he sick, is he mentally unwell" retort undermined the effort and attempt at folding storytelling into a Halloween choice. Number 4, Jon Moxley hates AEW. Right, so we've got a pro and con for you now. So right, pro, Jon Moxley, in attempting to lead from the front and with enough credit in the bank to do so, publicly reveals his frustrations with the creative decline of AEW and indifference from some of the locker room he perceives to not want it enough. Now for the con. The Death Riders leader made the same statements in a promo, clumsily attempting to establish his new heel stable during an era for the company where plenty of fans would actually agree with his stance. The comments, made both on television and in media appearances, felt like a departure from the steadfast loyalty Moxley has shown since debuting in AEW in 2019. Delivered with his trademark intensity, the statements immediately sparked speculation. Was this part of a larger story, or had he actually reached a breaking point here? On AEW television, the disdain sounded real, amplified by his gravelly delivery and the palpable tension in the arena. Fans, unsure whether to boo or cheer, met the moment with stunned silence. He doubled down in media interviews, assessing the leadership elements of his role in AEW, strongly implying that forceful change was the only way out of the slump. As he eloquently put it, "There's just a lot of noise in the world, and sometimes you really gotta do something drastic to really get everybody to stop what they're doing and look in your direction to make a point. And I'm absolutely not afraid to do that." Whether all an elaborate work or not, Moxley's statements highlight AEW's perpetual tightrope walk between on-screen chaos and backstage harmony. Number 3, airing the brawl-in footage. AEW's decision to show backstage camera footage of the infamous CM Punk Jack Perry fight on the April 10, 2024 edition of Dynamite was shocking by design. The footage, a grainy but gripping glimpse of the real-life altercation that rocked the company just minutes before their biggest show ever months earlier, blurred the line between storytelling and reality in a way few promotions dare to attempt. In that respect, it was absolutely bold. In others, it was an unnecessary airing of dirty laundry when the opportunity to simply let the situation lie was within reach. The clip was captivating on first viewing, even though it was fundamentally just a few seconds of human drama. Perry shoving Punk retaliating, and a flurry of crew members scrambling to break them apart. While brief, it confirmed long-speculated details about the incident that had been shrouded in rumor and spin, and brought back into the discourse by CM Punk's appearance on Ariel Helwani's podcast days earlier. But in the aftermath, fans were once again divided. Hooray! Supporters praised AEW for embracing transparency and leaning into its chaotic identity. Critics accused the company of exploiting real-life tensions at the expense of its locker room's morale. Ultimately, the segment embodied the too much information ethos that has both endeared AEW to fans and has on occasion exposed its greatest vulnerabilities. And going back to CM Punk, where else to head on that but to, yep, you guessed it, number 2, Brawl Out. Oh, you know the story, everybody knows the story. And to this day, over 2 years later, it directly and indirectly somehow continues to be the story. That's the problem, really. CM Punk's scorched earth tirade was a moment that saw AEW buried under the weight of its own dysfunction, with or without the man himself making it clear. The timing of his pre-planned rant was telling. What should have been a triumphant showcase for a promotion thriving on creative freedom became a chaotic spectacle that exposed cracks in its foundation. The unfiltered comments targeting the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and Hangman Page weren't just inflammatory on their own terms, they shattered the illusion of AEW as the harmonious alternative to WWE. Punk, sitting beside a visibly stunned Tony Khan, ripped into his colleagues, calling them irresponsible EVPs, and dismissing their backstage conduct in a rant that felt personal, not performative. His "I'm trying to run a business here" remarks stood out as particularly damning, implying that nobody else around him was. Worse still was Tony Khan's reaction, or lack thereof. Silent and wide-eyed, Khan's seeming inability to regain control spoke volumes here. AEW built its brand on freedom, but here it looked rudderless, with the owner owner letting his biggest star hijack the narrative, all while he munched on some muffins. Rather than showcasing AEW's strengths, the presser became a case study in mismanagement. It aired dirty laundry to millions, leaving AEW's reputation forever scarred. Number 1. Ric Flair, General. AEW's decision to work with Ric Flair in late 2023 epitomized the company's frustrating knack for undermining its own principles. What should have been a celebration of a wrestling legend's storied career became a case study in tone-deaf booking, as AEW leaned into nostalgia at the expense of its own credibility. Initially introduced as a surprise gift to Sting, Flair's arrival at Dynamite was met with mixed reactions, to say the least. The live crowd understandably popped for the moment, but less generous online discourse quickly turned critical. Flair's controversial personal history, including very recent allegations of historic sexual misconduct, made him an odd choice for a promotion that prided itself on being forward-thinking and progressive. Furthermore, rather than enhancing Sting's retirement tour, the Nature Boy's presence dragged things into uncomfortable territory. Nobody wanted that in the Icon's last run. The decision became even harder to justify as Flair was positioned not just as a nostalgic cameo, but as a recurring on-screen figure. Tony Khan's assertions that AEW didn't need to pay for his contract due to the agreement with Flair's energy drink justifiably did nothing to quell the anger. As it all trundled on, the rambling promos and increasingly erratic presence clashed with AEW's core values, rendering Flair little more than an alienating distraction.
We are gonna get into some hyperbole today. Let's not pretend it doesn't fuel wrestling. A better way to put this would be there are occasions where wrestlers make terrible decisions and it goes badly. So badly that, yep, it affects where they are on the card. Can always rehab yourself, but nobody needs that noise, so let's just do it. 10 wrestlers who hit the wall with a whoopsie. Shame we didn't call the video that instead. Number 10, Gail Kim makes the decision. This is why I wanted to get that intro right. Did you see how WWE treated Gail Kim? No wonder she wanted out by any means necessary. It was the 1st of August 2011 Raw though, and we had a women's battle royal. The winner would be the number 1 contender for the Old Divas title, and as soon as the bell rang, Kim threw herself to the floor. That's right, she eliminated herself. To be fair to Gail, her orders were to get out of there as soon as possible, and she took that literally. I mean, nobody could have achieved this any faster. The issue, of course, was this then triggered a breakdown of the relationship, and things got worse from there. At first, WWE wanted her to see out her contract, Kim felt differently, and eventually in September they came to an agreement. Let's just draw a line under it and move on. Gail has never been back, but again, I don't think she cares, nor does she want to. It was a rough ride for her, hence why she did this to begin with. You wouldn't do it for a bit of fun. Number 9, Jackson Riker goes off on social media. So you still see this today. If you are a WWE employee, you have to watch what you say on social media. Javon Evans didn't delete those other tweets for fun. Back in June 2020, it was way worse though, because Jackson Riker didn't think about any of this, because slam bang in the middle of a very delicate moment when it came to life and politics, he said some very controversial things that also saw the likes of Kofi Kingston, Kevin Owens, Mustafa Ali and more call him out. They were right to do so. He sort of floated on by for the next year or so, but it was not the same. Then in November 2021, he got released after everything with the Forgotten Sons had fallen apart due to all of the above. The real shame is stablemates Wesley Blake and Steve Cutler were also damaged by this. They never really got back to it either. KO, being the dude that he is, did mention how free speech is important, and he's right. It's super important. The timing and insensitivity of all this though, yeah, it wasn't good, and ultimately, a man in the middle paid the ultimate price. Well, not the ultimate price, but he did lose his job. Number 8, Enzo Amore goes rogue. This feels like something that could be looked past if WWE really wanted to forget it. It was still a wild decision. In January 2018, there were some very difficult reports regarding Enzo Amore that led him to being let go. It's only right to say by May he was cleared of any wrongdoing, and I think it's also important to point out that none of this was ideal on any level. I suppose Enzo felt upset by all of this, especially because he lost his job, so he came up with a plan. He crashed the 2018 Survivor Series in disguise, got a pretty decent seat, and when the time came, he stood up and started shouting his catchphrase from the audience. I mean, that's quite the choice. I think those around him thought Enzo was doing this on behalf of WWE, but nope, he had gone into business for himself, and security quite literally dragged him out the building. I can only assume that Amore thought given that he got a clean slate, a phone call would be next welcoming him back to the promotion. It wasn't, so he then thought, well, I'll go out there and make my own noise. So I can understand the logic here, But goodness me, it did not work out. Number 7, Big Cass doesn't listen. I am not doing anything about the current Big Bill without going through his story. When this did happen in 2018, the man was going through some serious personal struggles. Friends were genuinely worried about his overall health. This explains why he likely did what happened here, but focus on today first. He is kicking ass in AEW. Dude is proof he can turn it all around. As he himself did admit, during a WWE European tour, he was not on his best behavior, which landed him in hot water when we got to the May 1st episode of SmackDown. Vince McMahon instructed Cass to not attack the extra portraying a fake person playing Daniel Bryan. And yeah, that's right, the big man did it anyway, and it was a giant mistake. It was part of a feud with Danielson, and the two met at Money in the Bank where Cass lost. I would assume due to all of this, he was released pretty soon afterwards. Yeah, no, Bill has acknowledged all of this, and he has been so honest, it's gonna help others. There's nothing more important than that. You can make a faux pas in wrestling, but it's the greater world where you will be remembered. Number 6, Marty Jannetty hurts his own rep. Let us make it clear. The idea that when a tag team breaks up, there has to be one Shawn Michaels and one Marty Jannetty isn't fair. It's not like Marty was bad. He just constantly was his own worst enemy. Jannetty was still adamant he was not drunk or high at the 1993 Royal Rumble when he did face Michaels for the Intercontinental title. In fact, Marty has always said it was Shawn who was struggling. My guess is neither man was right, but as a headline, well, it kind of sums up the situation. The issue was Jannetty's reputation, though, because this happened a lot. That's why Vince McMahon fired him after this pay-per-view before Kurt Hennig went to bat for his friend. It must have worked because Marty was brought back and even won the IC title. When, yes, it all struck again. There were just so many stories about what the man was doing away from the ring that the WWF couldn't trust him anymore. It was far easier to not use him, and apart from the odd cameo here and there, it really was the end. It's crazy when you go back a few years before because some even said Jannetty was the better of the two, and that wasn't because Michaels was bad. They were just both top-tier next-level talents and probably could have ended up in the same spot. But history teaches us otherwise. It's like Jim Ross said, if you're not reliable, they probably can't use you. Number 5, Lex Luger jump ship. I don't think Lex Luger would change this even today. It was one of the most iconic moments in wrestling history, and he was slap bang in the middle of it. Let's ignore this stupid idea that Lex was just a physique too, because it's not true. That rhymes, so there's something to it. The man won world titles and was mega over in both the WWF and WCW. The whole I'm gonna be Hulk Hogan Part 2 idea didn't work, but Luger still remained popular. That sort of sums it up. On the 4th of November 1995, all this changed though, as WCW made a huge coup. Looking for ways to turn Nitro into the can't-miss wrestling show, it became clear that Lex Luger was working for the competition without a contract. Even more crazy, nobody at the World Wrestling Federation had noticed. So after a word from Sting and a chat with Eric Bischoff, Luger decided he would secretly turn up on WCW TV, and I tell you, my friends, the world stopped. McMahon was so surprised he felt like Lex was just pulling a fast one, so he went to his legal department, when he soon discovered it was an internal error. There was no deal. Given how heightened tensions were at the time, it feels like McMahon never forgave Luger for what he saw as a betrayal, hence why after WCW was bought, Lex never appeared on WWE television. I mean, he didn't even get into the Hall of Fame until the changing of the guard. That is quite the turnaround. Number 4, the mad story of Mr. Kennedy. Kennedy, every time. And do not get it twisted. Kennedy was due for the monster push in 2007 when he got involved in the then steroid scandal. It was doubly bad for Ken as weeks earlier, he'd done the interview circuit telling everybody WWE doesn't do that stuff anymore. I told you there was whoopsies. His second chance came in 2009 when Misfortune whacked him in the face again. During a tag team match that featured Randy Orton, Kennedy dropped the Viper in a way that was not nice for the legend killer. Randy went backstage and kicked off. He thought Kennedy was dangerous. Apparently John Cena felt the same way, so yeah, you can't recover from that. And weeks later, Ken was let go. This was huge news at the time. Because aside from winning the Money in the Bank briefcase, Kennedy was penciled in to be the illegitimate son of Vince McMahon at one point. I mean, that's a dumb story, but you're a made man. You're quite literally the boss's kid. In storyline. Usually such prospects are allowed to have one more opportunity too, but no. Kennedy has never even had a rumor that he would head back to the company, and that is nuts. He was golden at one point, but again, it goes to show you really do have to tread carefully. Number 3, Buff Bagwell winds everybody up. Steve Austin and Kurt Angle must have been given the heads up about Buff Bagwell on the 2nd of July 2001 episode of Raw. They quite literally punted him out the building. This of course tied into that match with Booker T, but go and watch it today. It's not great, but it's not a disaster, other than the crowd reaction. That does make sense though. WWE had told their fans for years that WCW sucked. They weren't going to embrace it now. The truth is, there was a lot more fallout. The locker room felt like Buff Bagwell was well too full of himself, all things considered, and during a training session, he'd also gotten into a fight with Shane Helms. Once more, most people thought it was Buff's fault. It then got truly bizarre, as when Buff couldn't make some shows, he had his mum, who I suppose was not on a forklift, ring Jim Ross and tell him Mr. Bagwell's not going to be around. I mean, it's not like this was school. JR was rumoredly aghast by all this, and Bagwell had so many detractors that next time he was on Raw, he got told, "You're done." Buff remains pretty bitter about this today, and given that he has had a very rough ride post-WWE, it never really felt like somebody who was going to be asked back. He was not, so that was that. Number 2, Dean Ambrose upset Steve Austin. Or so it seemed. People have talked about this after the fact, and it wasn't fans reading into the situation. There was definite animosity. It wasn't even in the ring or during a story, as it happened on Steve Austin's podcast that aired on the WWE Network. This was 2016 as well, so Dean was established as a star, yet on the show, he was just so standoffish. Sometimes he didn't even want to answer Stone Cold's questions. Not one to hide his emotions, Austin got noticeably frustrated on air, to the point he asked Dean Ambrose outright, "Are you doing enough for this company?" That's how he felt about it all. Future Jon Moxley then took umbrage with that, so yeah, the rest of the conversation was like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. It was so flippin' awkward. It really did feel like his stock fell after this, and eventually he became a comedy character. Think of the stuff he does today in AEW, and then recall him dressing up as the Mountie on SmackDown. Something must have happened. And now that we look at it in hindsight, maybe Mr. Moxley should have turned Stone Cold Steve Austin down. Number 1, Mabel hurts people, and not in the way you'd want. We do have to throw it out there that the real-life Nelson Fraser was beloved by everybody. Nobody ever has a bad word to say, other than the fact that in the mid-90s, he would have a tendency to hurt people in the ring. There's a chat behind this too, because in 1995, the then Mabel was being pushed as a top guy after winning the King of the Ring. He went after the World Championship too, and in the ashes of the original steroid scandal, he seemed perfect. We need big guys who aren't on drugs. Bingo. Sadly, when we got to SummerSlam, it all hit a wall when Mabel took on Kevin Nash. He crushed the then Diesel's back, even though he'd been asked not to do this, and Kevin was so damn angry, Vince McMahon considered dropping Mabel right there and then. Again though, people like this man, so they talked the boss out of it, but Mabel's card was marked. He would remain employed, but no longer in big title matches. This got worse when he broke The Undertaker's orbital bone with a leg drop, and with another Top Guy warning that he wasn't safe. Yeah, it was the beginning of the end. From that point on, he was essentially just a heavy for others. The dream was gone. But I really would try and Google all the nice things people do have to say about this man. He just sounds like one lovable monster.